The smell grew stronger with each stumbling step. Cole's vision had started to tunnel about an hour ago, the edges of the world going soft and gray, like old newspaper left in the rain. His rifle felt like it weighed 40 pounds instead of 8. The leather of his boots had cracked so badly that each step sent small shocks of pain up through his ankles. But pain was good. Pain meant he was still alive enough to feel something. He'd eaten the last of his hardtack 4 days back. The jerky had run out 6 days before that. He'd tried to hunt, but the few rabbits he'd spotted moved like they were mocking him, and his hand shook too badly to aim worth a damn. Yesterday, or maybe it was 2 days ago, time had gotten slippery. He'd chewed pine bark until his gums bled. It hadn't helped. The Garrett brothers were long gone. He'd lost their trail somewhere near the Canadian border, and by the time he'd admitted that to himself, he was too far gone to make it back to any town he knew. The map in his saddlebag might as well have been written in Chinese. Everything looked the same out here. Pine trees, rocks, more pine trees, a creek that might lead somewhere, or might just peter out into nothing. But that smell. Jesus Christ, that smell. It was full dark now, and Cole was navigating by moonlight and pure stubbornness. The temperature had dropped fast after sunset. It was early September, and this high up, September didn't care much about summer. His breath came out in visible puffs. He'd lost his coat somewhere, couldn't remember where. The trees thinned ahead, opening into a clearing, and that's when he saw the light. A campfire, small, controlled, the kind of fire someone builds when they actually know what they're doing. And beside it, a wagon. Not a Conestoga or anything fancy, just a sturdy wooden wagon with a canvas cover, the kind a tradesman might use. A single horse was tethered nearby, contentedly pulling at a patch of grass. And sitting beside that fire, tending to a cast-iron skillet that was producing the smell that had saved Cole's life, was a woman. Cole stopped at the edge of the clearing. Some part of his lawman's brain was still working, telling him to assess the situation before stumbling in like an idiot. But his body had other ideas, and he found himself moving forward before his mind could stop him. The woman looked up. She was big, not tall exactly, but substantial. Broad-shouldered, full-figured, the kind of build that suggested strength rather than softness. Her face was round and surprisingly young, maybe late 20s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical braid. She wore men's trousers, a shirt that had seen better days, and an apron that was stained with what looked like every meal she'd ever cooked. Her eyes went wide when she saw him. "Jesus, Mary, and Joseph," she said, and her voice had an accent he couldn't quite place. Not quite Chinese, not quite something else. "You look like death took a personal interest." Cole tried to respond, but his mouth didn't seem to be working properly. He managed something that might have been words, or might have just been noise. The woman was on her feet faster than someone her size should have been able to move. She grabbed his arm, her grip was solid, steady, and guided him toward the fire. "Sit," she said. It wasn't a suggestion. Cole sat, or collapsed. The difference wasn't clear. "When did you last eat?" she asked, already reaching for a tin plate. "Don't remember," Cole managed. His voice sounded like gravel in a tin can. "Can you keep down broth, or are you going to vomit it back up and waste my ingredients?" "Broth," Cole said. "Broth is good." She made a sound that might have been approval or might have been skepticism, then ladled something from a pot he hadn't noticed into a cup and pressed it into his hands. "Slow," she said. "You drink that fast, you'll regret it. I'm not cleaning up after you if you spew." The broth was chicken, rich and salty with hints of something herbal he couldn't identify. Cole took a sip and nearly wept. He took another, then another. "I said slow," the woman repeated, but there was something almost gentle in her voice now. Cole forced himself to pause. His hands were shaking so badly the cup rattled against his teeth. "What's your name?" the woman asked. She'd gone back to tending her skillet, flipping what looked like thick slices of bacon. "Rayner," Cole said. "Cole Rayner." "That's supposed to mean something to me?" "U.S. Marshal." She glanced at him, one eyebrow raised. "Long way from anywhere for a marshal. You chasing someone or running from something?" "Chasing." "Was chasing." Cole took another careful sip. "Lost the trail." She didn't sound particularly interested. "You armed?" Cole looked down at his hip. His revolver was still there somehow. "Yeah." You planning on using it on me? No, ma'am. Good, because I've got a shotgun in that wagon, and I'm a better shot than I look. She said it matter-of-factly, the way someone might mention the weather. Name's Rosie. Rosie May Chen. Thank you, Cole said. The words felt inadequate. For the broth, for not shooting me. Night's young yet, Rosie said, but there was a hint of humor in it. She pulled the bacon from the skillet and set it on a plate, then cracked 4 eggs into the remaining grease. You got any money, Marshal Reiner? Cole felt at his pockets, found a few coins. Some. Good. Because this isn't charity. I feed you, you pay. That's the deal. Fair enough? The eggs sizzled in the pan. Rosie worked with an efficiency that spoke of long practice, her movements economical and sure. She wasn't cooking for one. The amount of food she was preparing was enough for 3 or 4 people. You always cook this much? Cole asked. I'm a traveling cook, Rosie said. I go town to town, mining camp to mining camp, anywhere people need feeding. When I'm between jobs, I cook for myself. She paused. And apparently for half-dead marshals who wander out of the woods. Traveling alone? You see anyone else here? That's dangerous. Rosie snorted. You're one to talk. At least I'm not starving to death. She plated the eggs and bacon, added a thick slice of bread that she must have baked earlier, and handed it to Cole. Eat slow. Your stomach's forgotten what food is. Cole tried to obey, but the first bite of bacon nearly undid him. It was perfect, crispy on the outside, tender inside, seasoned with something that made it taste like the best thing he'd ever eaten. The eggs were cooked just right, the yolks still runny. The bread was dense and slightly sweet. He ate like a man possessed, trying and failing to pace himself. Rosie watched him with an expression that was hard to read. Not quite pity, not quite amusement. Something else. Where you headed? Cole asked between bites. Boseman, Rosie said. There's a hotel there that's looking for a cook. Pays decent, or so I'm told. Long way from here. About 3 days, if the weather holds. She poured herself a cup of coffee from a pot near the fire. You? Cole hesitated. The truth was, he didn't know. He was supposed to report back to Helena, tell his commanding officer that the Garrett brothers had escaped, face the consequences of that failure. But Helena was at least a week away, assuming he didn't get lost again, and he wasn't sure he had a week in him. Boseman works, he heard himself say. Rosie's eyebrows went up. Does it now? I need to get to a telegraph office. Report in. Boseman's got one. Boseman's also got a sheriff who doesn't much like federal marshals. Word of advice, don't mention your job until you've got your feet under you. Cole filed that information away. You know Boseman well? Never been, but I hear things. Rosie took a sip of her coffee. People talk to cooks. We hear all sorts of interesting things while we're feeding them. I bet. They sat in silence for a moment, the fire crackling between them. The night sounds of the forest surrounded them, wind through pine branches, the distant call of an owl, the occasional rustle of something small moving through the underbrush. You can sleep by the fire, Rosie said finally. But come morning, if you want to keep traveling with me, we establish some rules. I wasn't asking to travel with you. No, but you were thinking it. Rosie's eyes were sharp. You're lost, half-starved, and at least 2 weeks from anywhere you need to be. I'm headed in a useful direction. I've got food, and I know these trails. You'd be stupid not to ask. She wasn't wrong. And you'd let me? Cole asked. Just like that? Not just like that. Like I said, rules. Rosie set down her coffee cup. First, you pay your way. I'm not running a charity. I cook, you pay for the food. Second, you make yourself useful. I need help with the wagon, setting up camp, keeping watch. You pull your weight. Third, and this is the important one, you keep your hands to yourself and your opinions about my appearance to your damn self. We got a deal? The bluntness of it caught Cole off guard, but he appreciated it. No dancing around the subject, no false politeness. Deal, he said. Good. Rosie stood, brushing off her apron. There's a bedroll in the wagon you can use. We leave at first light, so get what sleep you can. And Marshall? Yeah? Don't make me regret this. Cole nodded. He finished the last of his meal, paid Rosie with what coins he had. She counted them carefully and nodded with satisfaction. and retrieved the bedroll from the wagon. As he settled down by the fire, wrapped in wool that smelled faintly of sage and wood smoke, he found himself thinking that maybe losing the Garrett brothers' trail had been the luckiest thing that ever happened to him. He was asleep before that thought could fully form. Cole woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of someone swearing creatively in what might have been Cantonese. He sat up, disoriented. The sun was just beginning to lighten the eastern sky, painting everything in shades of gray and pale gold. Rosie was already up, had already broken down most of the camp, and was currently wrestling with a harness that had apparently decided to be difficult. "Morning," Cole said, his voice rough. "About time," Rosie said without looking at him. "You sleep like the dead. Could have been robbed blind and never noticed." Cole doubted that. Years as a marshal had trained him to sleep light, but he didn't argue. He stood, rolled up the bedroll, and looked around for something useful to do. "Help me with this damn harness," Rosie said. "Buckle's caught on something and I can't see what." Cole moved over, examined the problem, and found where a leather strap had twisted around a metal ring. He worked it free. "Thanks," Rosie said grudgingly. Together they got the horse harnessed to the wagon. The animal was a sturdy bay mare with intelligent eyes and a tendency to lip at Cole's sleeve. "She like you," Rosie observed. "That's something. She's usually picky about men. I'm good with horses. We'll see." Rosie moved to the wagon, checking the tie-downs on her supplies. Everything was secured with a precision that spoke of long practice. "There's coffee in the pot and some cornbread from last night. Eat quick. I want to make good time today." They ate standing up, Cole wolfing down the cornbread while Rosie double-checked every buckle and strap. The coffee was strong enough to wake the dead and tasted faintly of chicory. "You always move this early?" Cole asked. "Best time to travel. Roads are empty, weather's cool, and we can cover more ground before the heat hits." Rosie climbed up onto the wagon seat with practiced ease. "You riding or walking?" Cole looked at the horse, then at his own battered boots. "Walking, probably. Don't want to crowd the mare. Suit yourself. I'll let you spell me on the reins later if you prove you can handle her." They set off just as the sun cleared the horizon, the wagon creaking and rattling over the rough trail. Cole walked alongside, his legs protesting every step, but gradually loosening up as the morning wore on. The Montana wilderness stretched out around them in all directions. Endless pine forests broken occasionally by meadows gone gold with late summer grass. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still holding on to the last patches of snow. It was beautiful country, if you didn't mind the fact that it was trying to kill you most of the time. Rosie drove with competence, guiding the mare around the worst of the ruts and rocks. She didn't talk much, seemed content with silence, and Cole found he appreciated that. Too many people felt the need to fill every quiet moment with noise. Around mid-morning, they stopped to rest the horse. Rosie produced hardtack and cheese from her supplies, not nearly as good as last night's meal, but solid trail food. "Tell me about this job in Boseman," Cole said, settling against a tree trunk. Rosie shrugged. "Not much to tell. There's a hotel called the Grand Union. Owners looking for a cook who can handle feeding guests plus miners who come in from the camps. Long hours, decent pay, room included. You applied?" "Sent a letter 6 weeks back. Got a reply saying to come for a trial. If I can cook what I say I can cook, the job's mine." "And if you can't?" Rosie gave him a look that could have stripped paint. "I can cook?" "I'm not doubting you, just asking what the backup plan is." "There is no backup plan," Rosie said flatly. "This is the plan. I cook. I impress them. I get the job. That's how it works." Cole heard something in her voice, not quite desperation, but close. Whatever this job meant to her, it was more than just employment. "How long you been traveling?" he asked. 3 years, cooking in mining camps, lumber camps, anywhere that needs feeding, moving on when the work dries up, or when people get too comfortable with the idea that they can treat me like dirt because I'm—" She stopped abruptly. "Because you're what?" "Nothing. Forget it." Rosie stood, brushing crumbs from her apron. "We should keep moving." They traveled until early afternoon when the heat became oppressive, and even the mare was showing signs of fatigue. Rosie found a spot near a creek where they could rest properly, unharnessed the horse to let her graze and drink, and set about preparing a midday meal. Cole watched her work. There was something almost meditative about the way she moved. Economical, efficient, but with an underlying artistry that suggested this was more than just a job to her. She built the fire to exact specifications, arranged her cooking implements with care, seasoned the food with what looked like instinct but was probably years of experience. "You always wanted to be a cook?" Cole asked. Rosie glanced at him. "Questions are extra." "I'm paying for meals, not conversation?" "Exactly." But there was the hint of a smile there. "What about you, Marshall? You always want to chase bad men through the woods until you nearly die." Cole considered that. "No, I wanted to be a lot of things. A teacher, maybe. Or a blacksmith like my father. But things happen, and you end up where you end up." "That's a cheerful outlook." "It's a realistic one." Rosie stirred something in her pot. "What things happened?" "Long story. We've got time." But Cole surprised himself by actually considering telling her. He hadn't talked about his past in years. Most people who knew him as a marshal assumed he'd always been one, like he'd been born with a badge pinned to his chest. "My family had a farm in Ohio," he said finally. "Small place. We grew corn, kept a few pigs. It was a good life, or good enough. Then one summer, raiders came through. This was right after the war. A lot of men came back mean and broken, looking for something to take out their anger on. They burned us out. Killed my father when he tried to stop them. My mother and sister made it out, but..." He trailed off. "But?" Rosie prompted gently. "But it broke something in my mother. She died that winter. Fever, officially, but really she just gave up. My sister went to live with an aunt in Pennsylvania. I was 17, angry, looking for purpose." He shrugged. "Found it in law enforcement. Turned out I was good at it." "Good at what exactly?" "Tracking, shooting, not giving up." Cole accepted the plate Rosie handed him, some kind of stew with beans and salt pork. "The law gave me a framework, a reason. Go after bad men, bring them in, make sure what happened to my family doesn't happen to someone else." "Noble," Rosie said, but she didn't sound mocking. "Pointless, more like. There's always more bad men. You bring in one, 3 more pop up somewhere else. But it's the only thing I know how to do." They ate in silence for a while. The stew was good, better than trail food had any right to be. "Your turn," Cole said. "How does a woman end up traveling alone as a cook in Montana Territory?" Rosie was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "My father was Chinese. Came over to work the railroads. My mother was Irish, working as a laundress in Sacramento. They met, fell in love, got married despite everyone telling them it was a terrible idea. I was born, and everyone who'd said it was a terrible idea felt vindicated because look at me. Not quite Chinese, not quite Irish, not quite anything that fits into a neat category." She said it matter-of-factly, but Cole could hear the old pain underneath. "My father died in a railroad accident when I was 10. My mother tried to keep us going, but Sacramento wasn't kind to a white woman with a half-Chinese daughter. She died when I was 16. After that, I did what I could. Worked as a scullery maid, then a cook's assistant, then finally a cook. Found I was good at it. Really good. Good enough that people would hire me despite..." She gestured at herself vaguely. "Despite what?" Cole asked, though he thought he knew. "Despite the fact that I'm fat, Marshall Rayner. You got eyes. You can see it. Everyone can see it. And in a world where women are supposed to be delicate and small and ornamental, being a woman who takes up space is considered a crime." Her voice had gone flat again. "But I can cook better than anyone you'll ever meet, so they hire me anyway because hunger doesn't care about aesthetics." Cole didn't know what to say to that. Any platitude would ring false. Any reassurance would sound like pity. So instead he said, "This is the best trail food I've ever eaten." Rosie blinked, then laughed. A genuine laugh that transformed her face. "Well, that's something." They broke camp an hour later and continued on. The terrain was getting rougher, the trail climbing steadily into higher country. The mare handled it well, but Rosie had to navigate carefully to avoid the worst of the rocky patches. Around mid-afternoon, they encountered their first other human beings. 2 men on horseback came around a bend in the trail, riding in the opposite direction. They were rough-looking, unshaven, dusty, with the hard eyes of men who'd seen the worst the frontier had to offer and become part of it. Cole's hand drifted toward his revolver. The men reined in when they saw the wagon. Their eyes passed over Rosie, then fixed on Cole. "Afternoon," the first man said. He was tall and rangy, with a scar across his left cheek. Y'all headed toward Boseman? That's right, Rosie said before Cole could answer. Her voice was steady, giving nothing away. Might want to reconsider, the second man said. He was shorter, broader, with the look of someone who solved most problems with his fists. There's trouble brewing in town. Miners are restless. Talk of strikes. Not a good place for... His eyes traveled over Rosie again, and something unpleasant flickered in them. For respectable folks. We'll take our chances, Cole said. His voice had gone flat and dangerous. The first man's eyes narrowed. You talk for her now? I talk for myself, Rosie interjected sharply. And I said we'll take our chances. Now, if you'll excuse us, we'd like to keep moving. The two men exchanged glances. For a moment, Cole thought they might push it, might decide that a lone woman and an unarmed-looking man were easy pickings. Then the first man shrugged. Suit yourself. Don't say we didn't warn you. They rode on. Cole watched them go, his hand still near his revolver. Friends of yours? Rosie asked dryly once they were out of earshot. Never seen them before in my life, but I've seen 100 like them. Think they'll double back? Maybe. Probably not. We don't look like we're carrying anything worth stealing, and you've got that shotgun. Cole glanced at the wagon. You really know how to use it? You want a demonstration, or are you willing to take my word for it? Your word's fine. But Cole kept watching their back trail for the next hour, just in case. They made camp that evening in a clearing that offered good sight lines in all directions. Rosie seemed to understand the need for caution without it being spoken, choosing the location with a tactical eye that suggested she'd dealt with this kind of situation before. Dinner was salt pork and beans with cornbread, simple but filling. As they ate, the sun set in a spectacular display of red and gold, painting the mountains in shades of fire. Tell me about Boseman, Cole said. What do you know about it? Rosie considered the question. Growing town, maybe 3,000–4,000 people when the miners are in. Started as a trading post, grew during the gold rush. Now it's trying to become respectable, churches, schools, that sort of thing. But it's still rough around the edges. Plenty of saloons, plenty of men looking for trouble. She paused. The Grand Union Hotel is supposed to be the finest establishment in town. 5 stories, indoor plumbing, dining room that seats 100. Owner's a man named Carlyle, Warren Carlyle, former banker from Chicago who saw opportunity and headed west. You've done your research. I always do. Know your employer before you walk in the door. That's the rule. Smart rule. They fell into a comfortable silence. Cole found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't in months, maybe years. There was something about Rosie's presence that was steadying. She didn't demand anything, didn't expect him to be anything other than what he was. Can I ask you something? Rosie said after a while. Shoot. Those men you were chasing, the ones you lost, what did they do? Cole's jaw tightened. Killed a family. Father, mother, 2 kids. Shot them for whatever money they had, which wasn't much. Left them in the road like they were nothing. Jesus. The Garrett brothers, Ben and Thomas. I've been after them for 3 months. Every time I get close, they slip away. They know this territory too well. He stared into the fire. I should have caught them by now, should have brought them to justice. But you didn't. No. So what happens now? Cole shook his head. I don't know. I report the failure. Maybe they send someone else. Maybe the Garretts disappear into Canada, and that's the end of it. You can't catch every bad man, Marshall. Doesn't mean I stop trying. Rosie studied him for a long moment. You're going to burn yourself out. You know that, right? Chase ghosts until there's nothing left of you. Maybe, Cole admitted. But what's the alternative? Give up? Pretend it doesn't matter? No. But maybe acknowledge that you're human, that you have limits, that failing once doesn't make you a failure. She stood stretching. I'm turning in. First watch is yours if you don't mind. Wake me in 4 hours. You trust me to stand watch? I trust you not to let those 2 idiots from the trail sneak up on us while I'm sleeping. Beyond that, she shrugged, we'll see. Cole took first watch, sitting with his back to a tree and his revolver in his lap. The night was quiet except for the usual sounds. Wind, animals, the occasional crack of a branch. The fire burned low, casting dancing shadows. He thought about what Rosie had said, about being human, about having limits. In theory, he understood it. In practice, he'd spent so many years pushing past those limits that he'd forgotten where they were. The Garrett brothers were gone. He'd failed. And somehow, instead of it destroying him, he'd stumbled into the path of a woman who cooked like an angel and talked like a prophet, and didn't seem to need him to be anything other than a reasonably competent traveling companion. It was strange, unsettling, and somehow almost comfortable. 4 hours later, he woke Rosie for her watch. She emerged from her bedroll alert and ready, took his position by the fire without complaint. "Anything?" she asked. "Nothing. Quiet night." "Good. Get some sleep, Marshall. Tomorrow's a long day." Cole did sleep, and dreamed of nothing at all. Boseman. The second day of travel was harder. The trail got steeper, rockier, forcing them to move slowly. The mare labored, and twice they had to stop to rest her. Rosie drove with grim determination, her jaw set, clearly frustrated by the slow pace. Around noon, they crested a ridge and got their first real view of the country ahead. The trail dropped down into a valley, then climbed again on the far side. In the distance, barely visible, was the faint smudge of civilization. "Boseman?" Cole asked. "Should be. Another day and a half, maybe 2 if this trail doesn't improve." They descended into the valley carefully. Halfway down, the mare stumbled, and Rosie had to fight to keep the wagon from sliding sideways. "Whoa, easy, girl," Rosie murmured, her hand steady on the reins. "Easy now." The mare recovered her footing, and they continued on, but Cole could see the tension in Rosie's shoulders. "You want me to take the reins?" he offered. "I've got it." "I know you do, but you've been driving all day, and you're tired. Let me spell you for a while." Rosie hesitated, then nodded. "Fine. But if you wreck my wagon, I'm leaving you in the valley." They switched positions. Cole took the reins, feeling the mare's mouth through the leather. She was tired but responsive, willing to work despite her exhaustion. Rosie settled into the passenger side, stretching her shoulders. "You do know how to drive." "Told you I was good with horses." Lots of men say that. Most of them are lying. They reached the valley floor without incident and stopped to rest. Rosie produced bread and cheese for a quick meal, and they ate in the shade of the wagon while the mare drank from a nearby creek. "Tell me about cooking," Cole said. Rosie raised an eyebrow. "That's a broad topic. Start anywhere. I'm curious." She thought about it, chewing slowly. Cooking is about transformation. You take ingredients that are nothing special on their own, flour, salt, water, and you combine them in the right way. Apply heat, and suddenly you have bread. Something greater than the sum of its parts. Her eyes got distant. It's the closest thing to magic I've ever experienced. And when you cook for someone, when you feed them something that makes them stop and really taste it, really experience it, that's power. Real power. The kind nobody can take away from you. Cole found himself nodding. He'd felt something like that last night, eating her cooking. More than just food, something that reached deeper. "Is that why you do it?" he asked. "Part of it. The other part is that I'm good at it. And in this world, you do what you're good at if you want to survive." She brushed crumbs from her lap. "What about you? Why law enforcement? Really?" Cole considered lying, giving her the easy answer about justice and duty. But something about the way she'd opened up made him want to match her honesty. "Control," he said. "After my family died, everything felt chaotic, random, like the world was just violence and chance and nothing you did mattered. Being a lawman gave me a framework, rules, a sense that maybe if I worked hard enough I could impose some order on the chaos." He paused. "It doesn't work, of course. The chaos always wins, but at least I'm doing something." "That's bleak. That's realistic." "No," Rosie said firmly. "That's giving up, just with extra steps." Cole felt a flash of irritation. "I haven't given up on anything." "Haven't you? You just said the chaos always wins. That's the definition of giving up, deciding the fight's not worth it before you even start." "That's not what Isn't it?" Rosie stood, brushing off her trousers. "You lost the trail on those men. Instead of regrouping, finding another way, you were ready to just wander into the woods and die. If I hadn't been here, you would have. I was starving. That's not giving up. That's biology." You gave up days before you started starving, Marshall. I can see it in your eyes. You decided you'd failed, and that was that. Never mind that you could report in, gather more information, try again. Never mind that you're still breathing and those men are still out there. You gave up. The words hit harder than they should have. Cole opened his mouth to argue, then closed it, because she wasn't wrong. What do you want me to say? He asked finally. Nothing. I want you to think about it. Rosie moved toward the wagon. Come on, we're burning daylight. They traveled in silence for the next few hours. Cole turned Rosie's words over in his mind, trying to find the flaw in her logic, the place where she was wrong. He couldn't find it. Maybe that was the problem. As the sun began to set, they found another campsite. This one less defensible, but with good water and grazing. Rosie made dinner, some kind of stew with wild onions she'd foraged, and they ate without talking. Finally, Cole broke the silence. You're right, he said. Rosie looked up from her bowl. About? About giving up. I did. Somewhere along the way, I stopped believing that any of it mattered. Stopped believing I could actually make a difference. He set down his bowl. I don't know when it happened. Probably slowly, over years. But you're right. Rosie didn't gloat, didn't say I told you so. She just nodded. So what are you going to do about it? I don't know yet. But thank you for saying it. Don't thank me yet. Realizing you've given up is the easy part. Actually changing, that's the hard part. They finished dinner in more comfortable silence. As Cole settled into his bedroll that night, he found himself thinking not about the past, but about the future. About Boseman, about what came next, about the possibility that maybe he wasn't done yet, after all. The third morning dawned cold and gray, with clouds hanging low over the mountains like dirty wool. Cole woke to find Rosie already up, moving around the camp with unusual agitation. Her movements were sharp, almost angry. Morning, he said, sitting up and immediately regretting it as his back protested. Sleeping on the ground was taking its toll. We need to move faster today, Rosie said without preamble. I did the calculations. At our current pace, we won't reach Boseman until late tomorrow, maybe the day after. My appointment at the Grand Union is tomorrow afternoon. We'll make it. You don't know that. She was packing up the camp with jerky movements, shoving items into the wagon with more force than necessary. That trial cook position, there are probably a dozen other people trying for it. If I'm late, if I miss it, they'll give it to someone else and I'll have traveled all this way for nothing. Cole stood, rolled up his bedroll. Then we push hard today. Skip the midday rest, keep moving until dark. The mare can't handle that. She's tougher than you think, and if she needs breaks, we'll give her short ones. But we'll make up time. He looked at Rosie, saw real worry in her eyes. This job means a lot to you. It's everything. The admission came out raw. I've been doing this for 3 years, Marshall. 3 years of moving camp to camp, town to town, cooking for men who think I should be grateful they're willing to eat my food despite how I look. 3 years of saving every penny, sleeping in my wagon, going without so I can have enough to make a real start somewhere. She turned away, busying herself with the harness. The Grand Union is a real establishment, respectable. The kind of place where I could build something permanent, where I wouldn't have to keep moving, keep proving myself over and over to every new crew of miners who think I'm a joke until they taste my cooking. Cole understood that kind of hunger. Not for food, but for a place to belong, for work that mattered, that lasted. We'll get you there, he said. I promise. Rosie laughed, but there was no humor in it. Don't make promises you can't keep. I don't. They set out before the sun was fully up, the wagon wheels crunching over frost-hardened ground. The clouds that had looked threatening at dawn began to darken further, and by mid-morning a cold drizzle had started to fall. Perfect, Rosie muttered, pulling her coat tighter. Just perfect. The rain made the trail treacherous. What had been merely rocky became slick and dangerous, forcing them to slow down despite their urgency. The mare picked her way carefully, and Cole found himself walking ahead sometimes, checking the path before Rosie brought the wagon forward. Around noon, the drizzle turned into a steady rain. Within an hour, they were both soaked through. We should find shelter, Cole said, water running down his face. Wait it out. No. Rosie's jaw was set. We keep moving. Rosie, this is dangerous. The trail's getting worse. Visibility's poor. I said we keep moving. Her voice had gone hard. You want to stop? Fine. Get off and wait it out. But I'm not losing half a day because of some rain. Cole studied her for a moment, then climbed back onto the wagon seat. Fine. But we take it slow. Slow as we need to, but we don't stop. The afternoon was miserable. The rain never let up, turning from steady to heavy and back again in cycles that seemed designed to break their spirits. The trail became a river of mud in places, and twice the wagon got stuck, requiring both of them to push while the mare strained in the harness. By the time they finally stopped for the day, more because it was too dark to continue safely than because either of them wanted to. They were exhausted, filthy, and soaked to the bone. Fire, Rosie said through chattering teeth. We need a fire. But everything was wet. The wood they gathered was sodden, and getting a fire started proved nearly impossible. Cole tried for 20 minutes, burning through most of their matches, before he finally got a small flame going. Even then, it was more smoke than heat. This is useless, Rosie said. She was shivering violently now. We need to get dry, and we can't with this pathetic excuse for a fire. The wagon, Cole said. Get in the wagon, out of the wind. I'll keep working on the fire. You're as wet as I am. I know, but I'm also bigger, which means I'll hold heat longer. Go. For once, Rosie didn't argue. She climbed into the wagon, and Cole heard her moving around inside, presumably changing into dry clothes if she had any. He focused on the fire, coaxing it, feeding it tiny pieces of wood that were only slightly less wet than the rest. Gradually, painfully, it grew. Once he had it going well enough to sustain itself, he gathered more wood, anything that might be even slightly dry, and built up the flames. Cole, Rosie's voice from the wagon, get in here. Fire needs tending. It'll keep for 5 minutes. Get in here before you freeze to death. Cole climbed into the wagon, and Rosie handed him a rough wool blanket. Strip off the wet clothes, wrap yourself in this. Rosie, don't be an idiot. We're both adults. You die of cold because you're too modest to change clothes in front of me. I'm going to be very irritated. She had a point. Cole peeled off his soaked shirt and trousers, trying to maintain some dignity while wrapping himself in the blanket. Rosie had already changed and was wrapped in her own blanket. Her wet clothes hung over a rope strung across the wagon's interior. Hang yours up too, she said. They'll dry faster than if you leave them in a pile. The inside of the wagon was cramped with both of them in it, but it was warmer than outside, sheltered from the wind. Rosie had a small oil lamp burning, casting everything in warm yellow light. You keep a tidy wagon, Cole observed, looking around. Every available space was organized with brutal efficiency. Cooking implements hung from hooks, supplies packed in crates that were lashed down securely. Even her bedroll was neatly tied. Have to. Space is limited, and if things shift while I'm traveling, it's a disaster. Rosie was digging through a wooden box. Here, emergency rations. She produced a bottle of whiskey and 2 tin cups. Cole raised an eyebrow. Emergency rations. Alcohol is a valid survival tool. Warms you up, kills pain, prevents infection. Don't look at me like that. She poured generous measures into both cups and handed one to Cole. He took a sip and felt fire spread through his chest. It was cheap whiskey, harsh and unrefined, but in that moment it tasted like salvation. Better? Rosie asked. Getting there. They sat in silence for a while, sipping whiskey and listening to the rain drum against the canvas cover. Cole could feel warmth slowly returning to his extremities, though his fingers still ached. I'm sorry, Rosie said suddenly. For what? For pushing us to keep going. You were right. We should have stopped earlier, found proper shelter. She trailed off, staring into her cup. You're worried about the job, Cole finished. I'm terrified about the job. The admission seemed to cost her something. This is my one shot, Marshall, my one real chance at something permanent. If I blow it, if I'm late, or if I can't deliver what I promised, I'm back to wandering, back to temporary positions and mining camps and men who think they're doing me a favor by letting me cook for them. She took a long drink. I can't do that anymore. I'm tired. I'm so damn tired of proving myself over and over. Cole understood that bone-deep weariness. He'd felt it himself, chasing the Garrett brothers through endless wilderness, knowing that even if he caught them, there would just be another pair of brothers, another crime, another chase. "What if you get there and they don't want you?" he asked quietly. Rosie's laugh was bitter. "You mean, what if they take one look at me and decide a fat woman can't possibly be the cook they're looking for, no matter how good my references are?" "That's not what I meant." "Yes, it was. And the answer is, I don't know. I honestly don't know what I'll do if that happens." She refilled her cup. "But I have to try. Because if I don't, if I let fear stop me, then I might as well admit that everyone who ever said I wasn't good enough was right. They're not right. You've known me for 3 days. Long enough to know you're the most competent person I've met in years. Long enough to know that any establishment would be lucky to have you." Cole leaned forward. "Listen to me. That hotel owner, what was his name?" "Carlisle. Warren Carlisle. Carlisle is going to take one bite of your cooking and hire you on the spot. And if he doesn't, if he's stupid enough to let your appearance cloud his judgment, then he's an idiot, and you're better off finding somewhere else." Rosie looked at him for a long moment, something unreadable in her expression. "You really believe that?" "I do." "Why? What do you care if I get this job or not?" Cole didn't have a good answer to that. 3 days ago, he'd been ready to die in the woods. Now he was sitting in a cramped wagon, wrapped in a blanket, drinking cheap whiskey with a woman he barely knew, and somehow it felt like the most important thing he'd done in years. "Because you fed me when I was starving," he said finally. "Because you could have left me to die and you didn't. Because—" he struggled for the words. "Because I think you're remarkable, and the world needs more remarkable people doing work they're good at." Rosie's eyes had gone bright, but she blinked rapidly and looked away. "You're drunk." "I've had half a cup of whiskey." "Well, I'm drunk. So we're going to blame this conversation on that and never speak of it again." But her voice was softer now, some of the hard edge gone. They finished the bottle between them, not drunk exactly, but warm and loose in a way that made the cramped wagon feel almost cozy. Outside, the rain continued to fall, but inside they were dry and relatively comfortable. "Tell me about Ohio," Rosie said after a while. "Before everything went bad. What was it like?" Cole let himself remember. Quiet, peaceful. We had a small house, whitewashed wood, with a porch where my mother grew flowers. She was particular about those flowers, peonies and roses mostly. Said a home wasn't a home without something beautiful to look at. He smiled at the memory. My father was a practical man. He didn't see the point of flowers, but every spring he'd help her plant them anyway, because it made her happy. Sounds nice. It was. We weren't rich, but we had enough. Food on the table, a roof that didn't leak, neighbors you could trust. My sister Sarah was 12 when the raiders came. She used to follow me around asking questions about everything. Drove me crazy, but... He stopped, the memory suddenly too sharp. Rosie didn't push. She just refilled his cup. Apparently there had been more than one bottle, and waited. After it happened, after they took her to Pennsylvania, I got one letter. She was doing well, she said. Our aunt was kind, but she didn't want to see me. Couldn't, she said, because every time she thought about me, she thought about that night. Cole took a drink. I haven't heard from her in 8 years. Don't even know if she's still alive. You could find out. Could. Haven't. He shook his head. Sometimes it's easier not to know. That's the saddest thing I've heard all week, Rosie said, and I've heard a lot of sad things. What about you? Any family left? My mother had a sister in Boston. We rode a few times after my mother died, but she made it clear I wasn't welcome to visit. A half-Chinese niece wasn't the kind of relation she wanted to acknowledge. Rosie's voice was flat. So no family. Just me and this wagon and whatever I can make of myself. They were quite a pair, Cole thought. 2 people alone in the world, carrying their losses like stones in their pockets, too stubborn to put them down. We should sleep, Rosie said eventually. Tomorrow's going to be hard. You take the bedroll. I'll sleep sitting up. Don't be ridiculous. We're both adults. We're both exhausted, and there's nothing improper about sharing space when the alternative is freezing. She arranged the bedroll and blankets. We sleep back to back. You stay on your side, I stay on mine. Nobody gets any ideas. Cole wanted to argue, but he was too tired and too comfortable to put up much of a fight. They settled in, back to back as Rosie had suggested, the warmth of another human being better than any fire. Cole? Rosie's voice in the darkness. Yeah? Thank you for the fire. For today. For not telling me I was being crazy when I insisted we keep going. You weren't being crazy. You were being determined. There's a difference. He felt rather than heard her laugh. If you say so. Sleep came easier than it had in months. Cole woke once in the night to find that they'd shifted in their sleep. Rosie was pressed against his back, one arm thrown over his side, breathing deeply. He should have moved away, re-established the boundary. Instead, he closed his eyes and went back to sleep. When he woke again, it was morning, and Rosie was already up, moving around outside. The rain had stopped. Cole emerged from the wagon to find her surveying the trail ahead. The ground was muddy but passable, and the clouds had broken up enough to let through weak sunlight. How far? He asked. If we're lucky and the trail's clear, we could make Boseman by late afternoon. She turned to look at him. And before you ask, yes, I'm still pushing to get there today. My appointment is at 2 o'clock tomorrow. I need time to prepare, to set up, to make sure everything's perfect. Then we'd better get moving. They broke camp in record time, both of them driven by the nearness of their destination. The mare seemed to sense their urgency and stepped out with more energy than she'd shown in days. The trail descended gradually now, following a creek down out of the mountains. Signs of civilization began to appear. A cleared field here, a fence line there, the distant smudge of smoke from chimneys. Around noon, they passed another traveler, an old man driving a mule loaded with furs. He tipped his hat to Rosie and gave Cole a curious look, but didn't stop to chat. Getting close, Rosie said, and Cole could hear the tension in her voice. By mid-afternoon, they could see Boseman proper, a sprawling collection of buildings spread across a valley, backed by mountains that still held snow on their peaks. It was bigger than Cole had expected, more established. There, Rosie pointed, that tall building near the center, that's got to be the Grand Union. It was indeed tall, 5 stories of red brick and white trim with a sign across the front that was visible even from a distance. It looked prosperous, permanent, the kind of establishment that catered to people with money. Rosie pulled the wagon to a stop just outside town. She sat for a moment, staring at the hotel, and Cole saw her hands trembling on the reins. You all right? He asked. No. She took a deep breath. I'm terrified. What if I'm not good enough? What if they laugh me out of the building? What if... Stop. Cole put his hand over hers. You're good enough, better than good enough. And if anyone laughs, they're an idiot. Now drive this wagon into town and show them what you can do. Rosie looked at him, and something in her expression shifted. You're a strange man, Cole Rayner. I'll take that as a compliment. It was meant as one. They drove into Boseman proper, and Cole was immediately struck by the energy of the place. The main street was wide and busy, filled with wagons, horses, people on foot. Storefronts advertised everything from dry goods to legal services. There were at least 4 saloons visible from where they were, and the sound of a piano drifted from one of them. Livery stable, Rosie said, pointing. We need to get the mare settled, get ourselves cleaned up. I can't walk into this Grand Union looking like something the cat dragged in. They arranged for the mare to be stabled and fed. Rosie paid the livery owner without haggling, which told Cole how serious she was about making a good impression. The wagon was secured in the stable's yard, and Rosie retrieved a carpet bag from inside. I need a bath and clean clothes, she said. There's a boarding house on 2nd Street that should have rooms. You coming, or are you going to find your telegraph office? Cole should have gone to the telegraph office. Should have sent his report, faced the consequences of losing the Garrett brothers' trail. But instead he said, I'll come with you. Make sure you're settled. The boarding house was run by a severe-looking woman named Mrs. Patterson who looked Rosie up and down with unconcealed disapproval, but took her money readily enough when Rosie requested a room with a bath. I'll need hot water, Rosie said. Plenty of it. That'll cost extra. I don't care. I need a proper bath, and I need it within the hour. Mrs. Patterson sniffed, but nodded. And you, sir? Cole realized she was talking to him. Just a room, no bath necessary. We don't allow unmarried men and women to share rooms. We're not, Rosie started, her face flushing. Separate rooms, Cole interrupted. We're traveling companions, nothing more. Mrs. Patterson looked skeptical, but showed them to adjacent rooms on the second floor. They were small but clean, with real beds and windows that looked out over the street. Cole washed up as best he could with the basin and pitcher in his room, then changed into the cleanest clothes he had, which wasn't saying much. He was contemplating whether he needed to buy new clothes when there was a knock on his door. Rosie stood in the hallway, transformed. She'd bathed and changed into a dress, the first time he'd seen her in one. It was plain but well made, dark blue calico that somehow made her look both professional and formidable. Her hair was braided and pinned up, and she'd scrubbed her face until it shone. "Well?" she asked, and Cole heard the vulnerability underneath the bravado. "You look perfect," he said honestly. "I look nervous. That too. But mostly perfect." He paused. "When's your appointment?" "Tomorrow at 2. But I want to go look at the hotel now, see what I'm dealing with. Maybe talk to someone about what they expect." She twisted her hands together. "Will you come with me?" "Of course." They walked to the Grand Union together, neither speaking much. The hotel was even more impressive up close: polished wood, brass fixtures, windows that sparkled in the late afternoon sun. The front entrance had double doors with etched glass. Rosie stopped at the bottom of the steps leading up to those doors. "I can't do this," she said suddenly. "Yes, you can. You don't understand. Places like this, they don't hire people like me. They hire thin, pretty girls who can serve tea and smile and not offend anyone's sensibilities. Look at this place, Cole. It's fancy, respectable. I'm not—" "You're a cook," Cole interrupted. "Not a tea service. They're not hiring you to be decorative. They're hiring you to feed people. And you're the best cook I've ever met. You've eaten my trail cooking. That's not the same as—" "Rosie," he made her look at him. "You traveled 300 miles to be here. You're not going to turn around now because you're scared." "I'm not scared." "You're terrified." "So am I, if I'm being honest. But we're going to walk up those steps, go inside, and you're going to introduce yourself. And tomorrow, you're going to cook the best meal of your life. And you're going to get this job. Because the alternative is giving up, and you're not someone who gives up." Rosie stared at him for a long moment. Then she straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and climbed the steps. The interior of the Grand Union was as impressive as the exterior: gleaming wood floors, chandeliers with actual crystals, furniture that looked like it had been imported from back east. A man in a dark suit stood behind a polished desk, and he looked up as they entered. "May I help you?" His tone was polite but cool, his eyes taking in Rosie's dress, her size, her face. "I'm here to see Mr. Carlyle," Rosie said, and her voice was steady. "I'm Rosie May Chen. I have an appointment for a cook's trial tomorrow." The man's eyebrows rose. "You're Miss Chen?" "I am." There was a pause, and Cole saw the man's expression shift through several emotions: surprise, skepticism, something that might have been disdain. But when he spoke, his voice remained professional. "Mr. Carlyle is expecting you tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock. The trial will consist of preparing dinner for Mr. Carlyle and several of our regular guests. You'll be expected to plan and execute a full meal, appetizer, main course, and dessert, using our kitchen facilities and whatever ingredients you can source from our suppliers." "I understand," Rosie said. "Very well. Please arrive by 1 o'clock to familiarize yourself with the kitchen." The man paused. "I should mention that you're not the only candidate. We've had several applicants for this position." "I assumed as much." "Mr. Carlyle will make his decision based solely on the quality of the food presented. I trust you understand the standards we maintain at the Grand Union." It was a subtle insult wrapped in professional language. Cole felt his jaw tighten, but Rosie's expression didn't change. "I understand perfectly," she said. "Thank you for your time." They left the hotel and walked back toward the boarding house in silence. Rosie's face was unreadable. "Rosie," Cole started. "Don't." Her voice was tight. "Don't tell me it doesn't matter what he thinks. Don't tell me I'm good enough." "I heard what he didn't say. I saw his face. He took one look at me and decided I couldn't possibly be what they're looking for." "Then prove him wrong." "What if I can't?" She stopped walking, turned to face him. "What if I cook the best meal I'm capable of, and it's still not enough? What if they've already decided, and tomorrow is just a formality?" Cole didn't have an answer to that. Because she might be right. The world was unfair like that, judged people on things that had nothing to do with their abilities. Then you walk out of there with your head high, he said finally, and you find somewhere else, somewhere better, somewhere that deserves you. There is nowhere else. This was it. My one shot. No. Cole surprised himself with the vehemence in his voice. This is one opportunity in one town. If it doesn't work out, there are other towns, other hotels, other restaurants. You're talented enough that you can make this work anywhere. Rosie laughed, but it came out closer to a sob. You don't know that. I do know that. I've eaten your cooking, remember? And if Carlisle is too stupid to see what he's got in front of him, then he's an idiot and you're better off without him. They had reached the boarding house. Rosie stopped at the front steps, and for a moment Cole thought she might cry. But instead she straightened up, took a deep breath, and nodded. You're right. This is just nerves. I'll be fine tomorrow. You'll be better than fine. We'll see. She started up the steps, then paused. Cole, will you be there tomorrow? At the trial? Do you want me to be? She hesitated. Yes, I think I do. I know it's foolish, but having someone in my corner, even just one person, would help. Then I'll be there. Rosie nodded and went inside. Cole stood on the street for a moment longer, watching the lights come on in the boarding house windows, thinking about tomorrow and what it meant. Then he turned and headed for the telegraph office. It was time to face his own reckoning. The telegraph office was a small storefront near the railroad depot. The operator was a thin man with spectacles who looked up when Cole entered. Help you? Need to send a message to Helena, Federal Marshal's office. The operator's expression sharpened with interest. You a marshal? I am. Cole pulled out his badge, showed it briefly. Don't see many federal men out this way. You on a case? Was. Need to file a report. Cole took the paper and pencil the operator offered and began to write. The message was brief and factual. He'd tracked the Garrett brothers to the Canadian border, lost their trail in difficult terrain, nearly died in the attempt. He was in Boseman now, awaiting instructions. He included no excuses, no justifications, just the facts. That'll be $2, the operator said when Cole handed over the message. Cole paid, then hesitated. How long for a reply? Depends. If your office is monitoring the wire, could be hours. If not, could be days. Any place I can wait? The operator shrugged. There's a boarding house down the street, or the Long Branch Saloon if you're inclined that way. I'll send word if something comes through. Cole thanked him and left. He should have gone back to the boarding house, gotten some rest. Instead, he found himself at the Long Branch, ordering whiskey he didn't really want and sitting in a corner where he could watch the room. The saloon was busy for late afternoon, miners coming off shift, cowboys in from the ranches, businessmen mixing with the rough crowd in a way that suggested Boseman hadn't quite decided what kind of town it wanted to be yet. You new in town? The bartender, a heavy-set man with a scar across his nose, was wiping down the bar near Cole's table. Just arrived today. Business or pleasure? Bit of both. The bartender nodded, like this made perfect sense. Word of advice. Keep your gun handy and your wits about you. We've got decent law here, but there's been trouble lately. Miners are angry about wages. Some of the smaller operators are having financial problems. Makes people tense. Appreciate the warning. Cole nursed his drink and thought about Rosie, about tomorrow, about what he was even doing here. He should leave. Should take the first stage out of Boseman, head back to Helena, face whatever consequences awaited him. This wasn't his problem. Rosie wasn't his responsibility. But the thought of leaving before her trial, before he knew how it turned out, sat wrong in his gut. He was still wrestling with that when a man approached his table, tall, well-dressed, with the confident bearing of someone used to being obeyed. You're the marshal, the man said. It wasn't a question. Cole tensed. Who's asking? Warren Carlisle. I own the Grand Union Hotel. The man pulled out a chair and sat without being invited. Small town. Word travels fast when a federal lawman arrives. Mr. Carlisle. Cole kept his voice neutral. What can I do for you? I hear you came in with a woman, Chinese woman, heavy-set, calling herself a cook. Carlisle's eyes were sharp. She with you. We traveled together. Why? She has an appointment at my hotel tomorrow. Trial for a cook's position. Carlisle leaned back in his chair. I like to know who I'm dealing with. So tell me, Marshall, is she as good as her letter claimed? Cole met Carlyle's eyes. She's better. You've eaten her cooking? For the past 3 days, best trail food I've ever had, and I've eaten a lot of trail food. Trail food isn't restaurant cooking. I'm aware. But if she can make bacon and beans taste that good over an open fire with limited supplies, imagine what she could do with a proper kitchen and quality ingredients. Carlyle studied him. You're advocating for her. I'm telling you the truth. What you do with it is your business. The truth? Carlyle smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. The truth is, I've had 36 applications for this position, most from men with years of experience in fine establishments back east. I'm taking a risk even considering a woman, much less one who looks like... He stopped himself. Like what? Cole's voice had gone cold. You know what I mean. Say it. Carlyle's smile faded. I run a respectable establishment, Marshall. My guests have certain expectations about who prepares their food, who serves them. Appearances matter. So she's fat and half Chinese, and that matters more than whether she can cook. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Cole stood. Here's my truth, Mr. Carlyle. That woman traveled 300 miles to get here. She saved my life when she could have left me to die. She's the hardest working person I've met and the most talented cook I've ever encountered. If you're too narrow-minded to see past her appearance, that's your loss. But don't pretend it's about standards or respectability. It's about prejudice, pure and simple. Carlyle stood as well, his face reddening. You don't know anything about running a business. You're right, I don't. But I know people, and I know talent when I see it. Tomorrow, she's going to cook you the best meal you've ever eaten. And if you're smart, you'll hire her on the spot. If you're not, if you let your prejudices cost you the best cook you'll ever find, then you're a damn fool. Cole walked out before Carlyle could respond. His hands were shaking with anger, and he forced himself to breathe slowly, to calm down. He just made an enemy of one of the most powerful men in town. Probably not the smartest move for someone who might need to stay in Boseman for a while. But he couldn't bring himself to regret it. He walked back to the boarding house through streets that were now fully dark, lit by gas lamps and the glow from saloon windows. Somewhere a dog was barking, and music drifted from one of the dance halls. When he reached his room, he found a note slipped under the door. He opened it, read Rosie's neat handwriting. Thank you for today, for everything. Whatever happens tomorrow, I'm glad we met. Sleep well. R. Cole folded the note carefully and tucked it into his pocket. Then he lay down on the bed, still fully clothed, and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow would tell a lot of stories. Whether Rosie got her job, whether Cole had a career to go back to, whether any of this meant anything at all. He fell asleep still wondering, and dreamed of nothing he could remember. Morning came too early and too bright. Cole woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the sounds of Boseman coming to life, wagon wheels on the street, voices calling out, the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer. His mouth tasted like old leather and regret, and his back ached from the lumpy mattress. He washed his face in the basin, stared at himself in the small mirror above it. 3 days of stubble covered his jaw, and his eyes looked tired. He needed a shave, needed clean clothes, needed a lot of things he didn't have. There was a knock on his door. He opened it to find Rosie standing in the hallway, already dressed in her blue calico dress, her hair pinned up precisely. But her face was pale, and her hands were trembling slightly. I can't eat, she said without preamble. Mrs. Patterson made breakfast, and I can't even look at it. My stomach's in knots. That's normal. Is it? Because I feel like I'm going to be sick. She pressed a hand to her middle. What if I've forgotten how to cook? What if I get in that kitchen and my mind goes blank? Cole pulled on his shirt, still talking to her through the open door. You won't forget. It's in your bones. You could cook in your sleep. You don't know that. I do. I've watched you. Even on the trail, exhausted and soaked through, you cooked like it was second nature. He finished buttoning his shirt and stepped into the hallway. What time do you need to be there? 1 o'clock. I have 3 hours. Rosie looked like she might throw up. 3 hours to plan a meal that could change my entire life. Then let's use them. Where's the market? What? The market. Where do people buy food in this town? You said you could source ingredients from local suppliers. Let's go look at what's available. Rosie blinked at him. That's actually smart. I have my moments. Come on. They walked through Boseman in the morning light, and Cole found himself noticing details he'd missed yesterday. The town had a raw energy to it, the kind of place that was still figuring out what it wanted to be. There were fine buildings like the Grand Union next to rough wooden structures that looked like they'd been thrown up in a hurry. Women in expensive dresses walked past miners in work clothes. A Chinese laundry sat across from a photography studio. The market was held in an open square near the center of town. Farmers had set up tables with vegetables. A butcher had a wagon full of meat, and there were at least 3 women selling eggs and dairy products. Rosie moved from table to table, examining everything with a critical eye. She picked up vegetables, smelled them, asked questions about where they came from and how fresh they were. The vendors responded to her with varying degrees of politeness, some treating her like any other customer, others with barely concealed disdain. "These carrots," Rosie said to one farmer, a weathered man with kind eyes. "How long have they been picked?" "Yesterday morning, still firm, see?" He handed her one. Rosie examined it, nodded. "I'll take 2 pounds. And those beets, are they sweet or earthy?" "Bit of both. Good for roasting. 3 pounds of those." Cole watched her work, watched the way she came alive when surrounded by ingredients. The fear that had paralyzed her at the boarding house was still there, but it was pushed aside by focus, by purpose. She bought carrots and beets, potatoes and onions, fresh herbs that the farmer's wife grew in her garden. At the butcher's wagon, she spent 10 minutes examining different cuts of meat before selecting a beef roast that made the butcher raise his eyebrows. "That's an expensive cut," he said. "I know what it is." Rosie's voice was firm. "Can you deliver it to the Grand Union Hotel by noon?" "I suppose. That'll cost extra." "Fine." She paid him without haggling, and Cole saw how much of her savings she was spending on this one meal. At the dairy table, run by a stern-looking woman with flour-dusted hands, Rosie bought butter, cream, and eggs. The woman counted out the eggs with exaggerated care, like she thought Rosie might try to steal one. "Anything else?" the woman asked, her tone making it clear she hoped the answer was no. "Do you sell buttermilk?" Rosie asked. "Sometimes. Don't have any today." "That's fine, thank you." Rosie took her purchases and moved on, but Cole saw the tightness around her mouth. "She was rude," Cole said once they were out of earshot. "I'm used to it." Rosie shifted her basket to her other arm. "People like her, they're not going to change. I just have to be good enough that it doesn't matter." They made one more stop at a small shop that sold spices and dry goods. The shopkeeper, a thin man with nervous hands, watched Rosie like she might break something. "I need cinnamon," Rosie said. "Real cinnamon, not cassia, and vanilla extract if you have it." The shopkeeper produced both, along with a small jar of something else. "This came in last week from San Francisco, cardamom. Not many people out here know what to do with it." Rosie's eyes lit up. "How much?" $2 for the jar." Cole saw Rosie hesitate. It was a lot of money for a spice. But then she nodded. "I'll take it." By the time they left the market, Rosie was carrying 2 full baskets and had spent what must have been a significant portion of her savings. But her face had color in it again, and her hands had stopped shaking. "What are you going to make?" Cole asked. "I'm not sure yet. I need to see the kitchen first, see what equipment they have." Rosie was walking faster now, energized. "But I'm thinking something that shows technique but isn't pretentious. Something that tastes like comfort but looks refined. Something that makes them understand that I'm not just a trail cook." They returned to the boarding house so Rosie could store her purchases and change into work clothes, the practical trousers and shirt she'd worn on the trail. Mrs. Patterson gave her a disapproving look but said nothing. At 12:30 they walked to the Grand Union together. Rosie was carrying her baskets and a canvas bag that presumably held her knives and other tools. She didn't speak, and Cole didn't push her. The hotel was busy with midday activity, guests coming and going, staff moving through the lobby with purpose. The same man from yesterday was at the desk, and his eyebrows rose when he saw Rosie. "Miss Chen, you're early." "I like to be prepared." Rosie's voice was steady, giving nothing away. "I was told I could familiarize myself with the kitchen." The man hesitated, then nodded. "Follow me." They went through a door marked Staff Only and down a hallway that led to the back of the hotel. The kitchen was larger than Cole had expected, a long room with 2 big cast-iron stoves, multiple work tables, and racks of pots and pans hanging from the ceiling. A woman was working at one of the tables, chopping vegetables, and she looked up as they entered. "This is Miss Chen," the desk clerk said to the woman. "She's here for the cook's trial. Miss Chen, this is Margaret, our current kitchen assistant. She'll help you find whatever you need." Margaret was in her 50s, gray-haired and sturdy, with the weathered hands of someone who'd spent a lifetime working. She looked Rosie up and down, her expression unreadable. "Afternoon," Margaret said. "Good afternoon." Rosie set down her baskets. "Thank you for your help. I'll try not to be too much trouble." "Trouble's part of the job." Margaret wiped her hands on her apron. "You brought your own ingredients?" "Some of them. I was told I could source from your regular suppliers as well." "That's right. We get deliveries from Miller's Butcher Shop and Hanson's Farm twice a week. Between that and what we keep in the cold room, we usually have what we need." Margaret gestured to a heavy door in the corner. "Cold room's through there. Help yourself." The desk clerk left, and Cole found himself standing awkwardly in the corner while Rosie began examining the kitchen. She checked the stoves. Both were already hot, being used for the hotel's regular lunch service. She looked at the work tables, ran her hands over them like she was assessing their sturdiness. She examined the knives hanging on the wall and clearly found them wanting, because she unpacked her own set from her canvas bag. "You cook?" Margaret asked Cole. "No, ma'am. I'm just here for moral support." Margaret's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. "She seems to need it. Looks scared half to death." "She's nervous. This job means a lot to her." "Means a lot to whoever gets it. Mr. Carlyle pays fair and it's steady work. Better than most places in town." Margaret went back to her chopping. "We've had 4 other people try out already. 3 men from back east who thought they were too good for Montana cooking, and 1 woman who couldn't handle the heat from the stove. None of them made it past the appetizer." Cole filed that information away. "What's Mr. Carlyle looking for?" "Someone who can cook for fancy guests without making it too fancy. Someone who understands that miners want real food, but the businessmen want to feel like they're getting something special." Margaret paused in her work. "And someone who can handle the pressure. We serve breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day. Weekends were busier. Holidays were packed. It's hard work." "She can handle it," Cole said. Margaret gave him a long look. "You sweet on her?" The question caught Cole off guard. What?" "Simple question. You sweet on that girl?" "We just met a few days ago." "That's not an answer." Cole didn't have an answer, or rather, he had one, but it wasn't something he was ready to admit out loud, so he said nothing. Margaret smiled properly this time. "That's what I thought. Well, for her sake, I hope she can cook as well as you think she can. Mr. Carlyle's a fair man, but he's got high standards." Rosie emerged from the cold room with butter and cream. She'd also found a lemon, which she held up triumphantly. "Perfect," she said, more to herself than to anyone else. "I can make a butter sauce with this." The beef roast arrived at 12:45, delivered by the butcher's son. Rosie examined it carefully, nodded with satisfaction, and set it aside. By 1 o'clock, she had assembled all her ingredients and was standing at one of the work tables, staring at them like they might suddenly rearrange themselves. Cole watched her take 3 deep breaths, watched her close her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, the fear was still there, but it was pushed down, controlled. "All right," she said quietly. "Let's do this." The kitchen door opened and Warren Carlyle walked in, followed by 3 other men and 1 woman. All were well-dressed, clearly people of means. Carlyle's eyes found Rosie, and his expression was carefully neutral. "Miss Chen," he said, "thank you for coming. Let me introduce your diners. This is Judge Harrison, Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore. They own the dry goods store. And Reverend Coleman. They've agreed to sample your cooking and provide their honest opinions." The 4 diners nodded politely, though Cole saw Mrs. Whitmore's gaze linger on Rosie with poorly concealed surprise. "You have 3 hours," Carlyle continued. "Appetizer, main course, and dessert. We'll be in the dining room. Send each course out when it's ready." He paused. "I should mention that I'm a particular admirer of French cuisine. My wife, may she rest in peace, was from Lyon, and she taught me to appreciate proper technique." It was a challenge, elegantly delivered. French cooking was considered the pinnacle of culinary art, complex and demanding. Carlyle was essentially telling Rosie that he had sophisticated taste and would know if she was out of her depth. Rosie met his eyes. I understand. I'll do my best. The diners left. The kitchen fell silent except for the sound of Margaret chopping vegetables at the far end of the room. Rosie stood very still for a moment. Then she moved. Cole had watched her cook before, but this was different. Every movement was precise, economical, purposeful. She lit both stoves and adjusted the heat with practiced ease. She arranged her ingredients in the order she'd need them. She tied on an apron and rolled up her sleeves. Margaret, she called, I'm going to need that oven for roasting in about 30 minutes. Will that interfere with regular service? Lunch service should be done by then. You'll have it to yourself. Thank you. Rosie started with the appetizer. Cole watched her work, fascinated despite having no idea what she was making. She peeled and julienned the beets with quick, confident knife work. She made a vinaigrette that involved the lemon, some of her expensive spices, and a technique with whisking that made the oil and acid combine into something creamy. She toasted walnuts in a dry pan, chopped them roughly, mixed them with honey and a pinch of salt. 20 minutes later, she plated 4 portions. The beets were arranged in a circular pattern, topped with crumbled cheese she'd somehow acquired, the candied walnuts, and a drizzle of the vinaigrette. It looked like something from a fine restaurant, artful without being fussy. Margaret, Rosie said, could you take these out? Margaret came over, looked at the plates, and her eyebrows rose. That's pretty. Pretty's not enough. It needs to taste good too. Only one way to find out. Margaret carried the 4 plates out on a tray. Rosie immediately turned back to her work, not waiting to hear the reaction. She seasoned the beef roast with salt, pepper, and something else Cole couldn't identify. She got it searing in a hot pan, turning it carefully to brown all sides. The smell was incredible. While the beef seared, Rosie prepared her vegetables. She cut the carrots into precise, uniform pieces. She peeled and quartered the potatoes. Everything went into a roasting pan with butter, herbs, and what looked like entire heads of garlic. Margaret returned with the empty plates. They want to know what the dressing was made from. Lemon, walnut oil, honey, cardamom, and black pepper, Rosie said without looking up. Why? Judge Harrison said it was the most interesting thing he's eaten in 6 months. Mrs. Whitmore asked if you'd consider sharing the recipe. Margaret paused. I think you got them. Rosie's hands, which had been moving steadily, trembled for just a second. Then she was back to work. The beef went into the oven along with the vegetables. Rosie set a timer, a small hourglass she'd brought with her, and started on her sauce. She melted butter in a pan, added shallots so finely minced they were almost a paste, deglazed with wine that Margaret produced from somewhere. She let it reduce, added cream, adjusted the seasoning with a precision that suggested she was tasting it in her mind rather than on her tongue. You've done this before, Cole observed. Rosie glanced at him. She'd been so focused that Cole thought she might have forgotten he was there. I worked in a hotel kitchen in Sacramento for 6 months, she said, stirring her sauce. The chef was French. He was a bastard, treated me like I was stupid, but he knew technique. I learned everything I could from him before he fired me. Why did he fire you? Because I was getting better than him and he knew it. Rosie tasted the sauce, added a pinch of salt. He told everyone it was because I was unreliable. Really, it was because I corrected his bechamel in front of a sous chef and he couldn't handle being wrong. The timer ran out. Rosie checked the beef, tested it with a long needle, and nodded with satisfaction. She pulled it from the oven, set it on a cutting board to rest. The vegetables came out golden and caramelized, smelling of butter and thyme. She plated the main course with the same care she'd given the appetizer. Slices of beef, perfectly medium rare, arranged on each plate. Vegetables alongside, the sauce drizzled over everything with an artist's eye for how it would look. That's a proper plate, Margaret said, coming over to collect them. You've got real training. Thank you. Margaret took the plates out. Rosie stood at her work table, hands braced against the wood, breathing hard. You all right? Cole asked. Dessert, Rosie said. I still have to do dessert and I'm running out of time. She'd been working for 2 hours straight and Cole could see the exhaustion setting in. But she didn't slow down. She started on what looked like a cake, mixing flour and sugar and eggs with the mechanical precision of someone who'd made the same thing 100 times. She added the vanilla extract she'd bought, some of the cinnamon, a pinch of the cardamom. The batter went into a cake pan, then into the oven. While it baked, Rosie made a caramel sauce that involved boiling sugar until it turned amber, then adding cream in a way that made the pan hiss and steam dangerously. "Careful," Margaret called from across the room. "That's how people lose skin." "I know what I'm doing." But her hands were shaking now, and when she poured the cream, some of it splattered. She jerked back, narrowly avoiding a burn. "Rosie," Cole said, moving closer. "Take a breath." "I don't have time for a breath. The cake's going to be done in 10 minutes, and I still need to—" "Rosie, breathe." She stopped, looked at him. Her face was flushed from the heat of the kitchen, and there was a smudge of flour on her cheek. "You've got this," Cole said quietly. "The hard part's done. All that's left is finishing." Rosie took a shaky breath, then another. "Right, finishing." The cake came out golden and perfect. Rosie let it cool for exactly 5 minutes, timed with her hourglass, then turned it out onto a plate. She drizzled the caramel sauce over it in a pattern that looked random but was clearly deliberate. She added a dusting of cinnamon and a few candied walnuts left over from the appetizer. 4 slices, 4 plates, each one identical. "Done," Rosie said, and her voice was barely a whisper. Margaret took the dessert plates out. The kitchen fell silent. Rosie sank onto a stool, her legs apparently deciding they were done holding her up. Cole wanted to say something encouraging, something that would ease the awful tension in her face, but there was nothing to say. All they could do was wait. Margaret returned 15 minutes later. Her face was carefully neutral as she walked into the kitchen, but when she reached Rosie, she smiled. "Mr. Carlyle wants to see you in the dining room." Rosie stood on shaky legs. "Is that good or bad?" "That's for him to tell you. Come on." Rosie looked at Cole. He nodded, and she followed Margaret out of the kitchen. Cole waited, pacing, feeling useless. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Cole was seriously considering going to find them when the kitchen door opened and Rosie walked back in. Her face was unreadable. "Rosie?" Cole said. She looked at him, and then she started to cry. Not delicate tears, but great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. Cole's heart sank. She hadn't gotten it. After all that work, all that talent, they'd rejected her anyway. He moved toward her, ready to offer whatever comfort he could, and she threw her arms around him. "I got it," she said into his shoulder. "Cole, I got it. The job is mine." Relief flooded through him so suddenly it was almost painful. "Of course you did. Of course you got it." Carlyle said. Rosie pulled back, wiping her eyes. "He said it was the best meal he's had since leaving Chicago. Said my technique was flawless. Said he'd be a fool not to hire me on the spot." She laughed, a sound halfway between joy and hysteria. "Mrs. Whitmore asked if I'd cater her daughter's wedding. The judge wants to hire me for private dinners. Cole, they loved it. They actually loved it. I told you they would." "You did." "I didn't believe you, but you did." Rosie was grinning now, tears still streaming down her face. "I start next week. He's giving me time to get settled, to plan my first real menu. And the salary, Cole, the salary is more than I've made in the last year combined. Plus room and board. Plus a budget for ingredients." Cole found himself grinning too, caught up in her joy. "That's incredible. It's everything. It's everything I've been working for." Rosie wiped her eyes again. "I need to sit down. I think I might fall down." She did sit, right there on the kitchen floor, her back against the wall. Cole sat beside her. "Thank you," Rosie said after a moment, "for being here, for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself, for everything. You did the hard part. Maybe, but I couldn't have done it alone." She turned to look at him. "What about you? Did you hear from Helena?" Cole had almost forgotten about his own situation. "Not yet. Probably tomorrow." "And when you do? What then?" "I don't know. Depends on what they say. Could be I'm fired. Could be they want me back immediately. Could be anything." Rosie was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You could stay." "Stay?" "In Boseman. There's work here for a man with your skills. The sheriff's department is always looking for deputies. Or you could do private security. Or—" She stopped. "Never mind. That's foolish. You have a career, responsibilities. You can't just throw that away." but Cole found himself seriously considering it. What did he have in Helena, really? A job that had worn him down to nothing, chasing men he'd never catch, watching the chaos win over and over. No friends to speak of, no family, just a badge and a paycheck and the slow erosion of hope. Here, he had... what? A woman he'd known for less than a week who'd somehow become important to him in ways he didn't fully understand. The possibility of starting over, of building something instead of just tearing things down. "I'll think about it," he said. Rosie nodded, didn't push. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the hotel around them. Finally, Margaret stuck her head into the kitchen. "Miss Chen, Mr. Carlyle would like to discuss your contract in more detail if you have time." Rosie stood, brushing off her trousers. "Of course. Cole, will you wait for me?" "I'll be here." She left with Margaret, and Cole remained on the kitchen floor thinking about choices and consequences and the strange way life sometimes worked out. The door opened again. This time it was Carlyle himself who entered. He looked at Cole, and his expression was complicated. "Marshal Rayner," he said, "I owe you an apology." Cole stood. "For what?" "For my assumptions last night. You were right. I let my prejudices color my judgment. Miss Chen is remarkably talented, and I nearly lost her because I was too busy noticing what she looked like instead of what she could do." Carlyle extended his hand. "Thank you for setting me straight." Cole shook his hand, surprised. "Just told you the truth." "Yes, well, the truth is often uncomfortable." Carlyle paused. "I hear you're waiting on word from Helena. If that doesn't work out, if you find yourself needing employment, I could use a man like you. Security is becoming more of an issue as Boseman grows. Someone with federal experience would be valuable." "I'll keep that in mind." Carlyle nodded and left. Cole stood alone in the kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of Rosie's triumph. Dirty pots and pans, the lingering smells of her cooking, the sense that something significant had just happened. Rosie returned an hour later, holding a contract and looking dazed. "It's real," she said. "I have a real job, a real salary, a real kitchen." "You earned it." "I know. I can't quite believe it yet." She looked around the kitchen. "This is mine now. All of this. I can cook whatever I want, create my own menus, build something lasting." Her eyes found Cole's. "What about you? Any word?" "Carlyle offered me a job." Rosie's eyebrows rose. "Doing what?" "Security. For the hotel and around town. Says he needs someone with law enforcement experience." "Are you going to take it?" "I don't know. Haven't heard from Helena yet. Seems premature to accept another job when I might still have one." "But if you don't, if Helena lets you go..." Cole met her eyes. "Then maybe I stay. Maybe I try something different for a change." Rosie smiled, and it was like the sun coming out. "I'd like that. You staying, if that's what you decide. We'll see what Helena says." They walked back to the boarding house together as the sun began to set, painting Boseman in shades of gold and amber. The town felt different now, less threatening and more like a place where things might actually work out. Mrs. Patterson informed them that a telegram had arrived for Cole while they were gone. He read it in his room, Rosie waiting in the hallway. The message was brief. His services were no longer required. His badge should be returned by mail. His final pay would be sent within the month. He'd been fired. Cole read it twice, waiting for the anger or disappointment to hit. Instead, he felt something like relief. The decision had been made for him. The choice was no longer his to make. He opened the door. Rosie took one look at his face and knew. "They let you go," she said. "They did." "I'm sorry." "Don't be." Cole surprised himself by meaning it. I think maybe it's for the best." "What will you do?" Cole thought about it, about the job Carlyle had offered, about staying in Boseman, about building something instead of chasing ghosts, about Rosie and the strange, unexpected connection they'd formed. "I think I'll take Carlyle up on his offer," he said. "See what happens." Rosie's smile could have lit the whole town. "Good, that's good." They stood in the hallway of the boarding house, two people who'd found each other by accident and were choosing, deliberately, to see what came next. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a guarantee. But it was a start. and sometimes that was enough. The first week passed in a blur of newness that left both of them exhausted and exhilarated in equal measure. Rosie moved into her room at the Grand Union, a small space on the third floor with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window that overlooked the main street. It wasn't much, but it was hers, permanently. And Cole watched her arrange her few possessions with a care that suggested she still couldn't quite believe it was real. Cole took a room at a different boarding house, cheaper than Mrs. Patterson's, run by a widow named Mrs. Kowalski, who didn't ask questions and kept the place clean enough. He met with Carlisle on his second day in town to discuss the security position. "The job is straightforward," Carlisle said, sitting behind his desk in an office on the hotel's second floor. "You'll patrol the hotel and the surrounding area, deal with disturbances, make sure our guests feel safe. We've had issues with drunk minors causing problems, pickpockets working the lobby, that sort of thing. I need someone with authority who can handle situations before they escalate." "What about the local sheriff?" Cole asked. "Sheriff Meeks is a good man, but he's got the whole town to worry about. I need someone focused specifically on the Grand Union and its interests." Carlisle pulled out a contract. "Salary is $60 a month plus meals at the hotel. You'll work 6 days a week, evenings primarily, though there will be days when I need you during business hours. You'll be expected to dress professionally and conduct yourself in a manner that reflects well on the establishment." $60 was less than Cole had made as a marshal, but with meals included, it was enough to live on. And the work would be different, protecting instead of chasing, building instead of hunting. "I'll take it," Cole said. "Good. You start tomorrow evening." Carlisle stood, extended his hand. "Welcome to the Grand Union, Mr. Rayner." That first evening on the job, Cole stood in the hotel lobby wearing new clothes, a dark suit that Carlisle had insisted on, paid for by the hotel, and felt like an imposter. He was used to trail dust and worn leather, not polished shoes and a vest. But the guests seemed to appreciate his presence, and the desk clerk nodded approvingly when Cole made his first patrol through the building. Around 9 o'clock, a miner stumbled into the lobby, clearly drunk, and started loudly demanding a room. The desk clerk tried to politely refuse him. The man was filthy and couldn't produce payment, but the miner became belligerent. Cole intervened before things could escalate. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." The miner turned, swaying. He was big, probably 6 feet and 200 pounds of muscle built from hard labor. "Who the hell are you?" "Security for this establishment. You need to leave. Now." "I want a damn room." "Not tonight, you don't." Cole kept his voice level. "Come back tomorrow when you're sober and have money. But right now, you need to go." The miner took a swing. Cole saw it coming from a mile away, sidestepped easily, and had the man's arm twisted behind his back before the drunk even realized what had happened. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," Cole said quietly. "Walk out on your own, or I drag you out. Your choice." The miner cursed but stopped struggling. Cole walked him to the door and released him with a firm push toward the street. "Don't come back until you can behave yourself," Cole said. The miner mumbled something incomprehensible and stumbled off into the night. Cole returned to the lobby to find the desk clerk staring at him with something like awe. "That was impressively handled," the clerk said. Cole shrugged. "Years of practice." The rest of the evening was quieter. Cole made regular patrols, checked the dining room where Rosie was serving dinner to a full house, and dealt with a minor dispute between two guests over a card game that had gotten heated. When his shift ended at midnight, he was tired but satisfied. It wasn't the same as being a marshal, but it was work that mattered, work that helped people. That was something. Rosie was waiting for him in the kitchen, sitting at one of the work tables with a cup of coffee and a plate of food. "Figured you might be hungry," she said, pushing the plate toward him. It was some kind of beef stew with vegetables, thick and rich and smelling like heaven. Cole sat down and tried it. The meat was so tender it fell apart at the touch of his fork, and the broth had a depth of flavor that seemed impossible. "This is incredible," he said. "It's just leftovers from dinner service." But Rosie looked pleased. "How was your first night?" "Good. Dealt with a drunk miner, broke up a card dispute, otherwise uneventful." "Welcome to Boseman." Rosie sipped her coffee. "It's not all mining camps and wilderness out here. Some of us are trying to build something civilized." "I noticed." They sat in comfortable silence while Cole ate. The kitchen was quiet at this hour, just the two of them and the sound of the building settling for the night. "You miss it?" Rosie asked after a while. Being a marshal? Cole considered the question. Not as much as I thought I would. The work, chasing criminals, tracking leads, that was interesting. But the rest of it, he shook his head. The bureaucracy, the politics, the sense that nothing you did really mattered in the long run. I don't miss that. And this? This is better? Different. I can't say better yet. Ask me in a month. Fair enough. Rosie stood, started cleaning up. I should get to bed. Early morning tomorrow, we've got a wedding party coming through, and they want a special breakfast menu. You need help with anything? From you? Unless you've suddenly learned to cook, probably not. But she smiled as she said it. Go get some sleep, Cole. You look like you need it. He did sleep, better than he had in weeks. The work was different, but it was still work, still gave him structure and purpose. And knowing that Rosie was just down the street, building her own new life, made him feel less alone than he had in years. The days fell into a pattern. Rosie worked brutal hours in the kitchen, up before dawn to prepare breakfast, working straight through until dinner service ended late in the evening. But she thrived on it. Cole would stop by the kitchen during his patrols and find her covered in flour or stirring something on the stove, humming to herself, completely in her element. The hotel guests raved about her cooking. Word spread quickly through Boseman that the Grand Union had hired a cook who could make even the simplest meal taste extraordinary. Reservations for the dining room increased. Carlisle was delighted. Cole's work settled into a rhythm too. Most nights were quiet, just a matter of being present and visible. Occasionally there would be trouble, a fight in the bar, a theft, once a fire in a guest room that was caught early, but nothing he couldn't handle. 2 weeks into their new jobs, Cole ran into actual trouble. It was a Friday night, the hotel busy with miners in town for the weekend. Cole was making his rounds when he heard shouting from one of the private dining rooms. He went to investigate and found 2 men in an argument that was rapidly escalating toward violence. Gentlemen, Cole said, stepping into the room, whatever this is about, let's discuss it calmly. The larger of the 2 men turned to face Cole, and something in his expression made Cole's hand drift toward his gun. This ain't your business, friend. When it happens in this hotel, it's my business. What's the problem? The smaller man, well-dressed and clearly educated, spoke up. This man accused me of cheating at cards. I've done no such thing, and I won't stand for the insult. Because you did cheat, the larger man growled. I saw you deal from the bottom of the deck. That's absurd. I want my money back. Cole assessed the situation quickly. The larger man was drunk, angry, and armed. He could see the bulge of a gun under the man's coat. The smaller man was scared, trying to hide it behind indignation. Here's what's going to happen, Cole said calmly. You're both going to settle this dispute peacefully, or you're both going to leave. Those are your options. I ain't going nowhere until I get what's owed to me. Then prove the cheating. Show me how he did it. The larger man faltered. What? If he cheated, you saw how. Show me. Otherwise, this is just an accusation, and I can't help you. I know what I saw. Then demonstrate it. Cole kept his voice level, reasonable. If you can prove he cheated, I'll support your claim and will involve the sheriff. If you can't, you apologize and we all move on with our evening. The larger man clearly hadn't expected this. He looked at the cards on the table, at the smaller man, back to Cole. It was fast. I can't just... Then you can't prove it. Cole moved between the 2 men. Which means you need to leave, right now, before this gets worse for everyone involved. For a moment, Cole thought the man might actually draw his gun. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Then the man spat on the floor and headed for the door. This ain't over, he said to the smaller man. Actually, it is, Cole said. You come back to this hotel, you'll be arrested for trespassing. Am I clear? The man left, still muttering threats. Cole turned to the smaller man, who had gone pale. Thank you, the man said shakily. I thought he was going to... Were you cheating? Cole asked quietly. The man's face flushed. That's not... Answer the question. A long pause, then... Perhaps. A little. But he was drunk and obnoxious, and I didn't think... You didn't think you'd get caught? Cole shook his head. Pack up your cards and leave. Different hotel, different town, I don't care. But you're done here. You can't... I can, and I am. You're lucky I'm not having you arrested. Now go, before I change my mind." The man gathered his things and left quickly. Cole stood in the empty dining room, feeling the adrenaline start to fade, leaving exhaustion in its wake. He found Rosie in the kitchen later, after his shift ended. She was making bread for the next morning, kneading dough with a rhythmic motion that looked almost meditative. "Rough night?" she asked, without looking up. "How'd you know?" "You've got that look. Like you've been dealing with idiots and you're tired of it." She shaped the dough into a ball, set it in a bowl to rise. "Want to talk about it?" Cole told her about the card dispute, about the drunk miner and the cheating gambler. Rosie listened, occasionally asking questions, and when he was done, she handed him a piece of bread left over from dinner with fresh butter. "People are stupid," she said. "Greedy and stupid, and they think they can get away with things they shouldn't. That's a cheerful view of humanity. It's an accurate one, but some people are decent. You're decent. I like to think I'm decent. That's enough to work with." Since Cole ate the bread, it was excellent, of course, and found himself smiling despite his exhaustion. "When did you become a philosopher?" "I've always been one. You just weren't paying attention." Rosie started on a second batch of dough. "Are you happy here, Cole? Really happy?" The question caught him off guard. Yeah, I think I am. Why?" "Just wondering. You gave up a lot to stay. A career, a pension, whatever future you had mapped out. I want to make sure it was worth it." It was worth it," Cole said, and realized he meant it. "This is better. Different, but better." "Good." Rosie's hands moved through the dough with practiced ease. "Because I'm happy here too, and it's nice having someone who understands what that means. Someone who knows what it's like to build something from nothing." They talked until late into the night, about everything and nothing. Their jobs, the town, the strange cast of characters that populated Boseman. When Cole finally left, walking through the quiet streets to his boarding house, he felt more settled than he had in years. The weeks turned into months. Fall deepened into winter, bringing snow that transformed Boseman into something out of a storybook. Rosie's reputation continued to grow. She catered private parties, taught cooking classes to some of the wealthier women in town, and even started experimenting with new recipes that blended her Chinese heritage with Western ingredients. Cole's work expanded too. Carlisle had him training new security staff, coordinating with the sheriff's office on matters affecting the hotel, even consulting on safety measures for other businesses in town. He was building a reputation of his own as someone fair but firm, someone who could handle difficult situations without unnecessary violence. They fell into a comfortable pattern, Cole and Rosie. He would stop by the kitchen during his shifts, and she would feed him whatever she was working on. She would walk with him sometimes on her rare days off, exploring Boseman and the surrounding area. They talked about everything, argued about nothing important, and gradually became as essential to each other's lives as breathing. It was Margaret who finally said what everyone was thinking. Cole had stopped by the kitchen one afternoon to pick up a meal for a guest who was too ill to come down to the dining room. Margaret was there, chopping vegetables, and she watched as Rosie carefully arranged the tray with the same attention to detail she gave everything. "You two going to get married, or just keep dancing around it forever?" Margaret asked bluntly. Rosie nearly dropped the tray. "What? You heard me? Everyone in this hotel can see it except apparently the two of you. He comes by here 3 times a day minimum. You light up every time he walks in the room. He looks at you like you hung the moon. At this point, it's getting embarrassing how obvious you both are." "We're friends," Rosie said, her face burning red. "Sure you are. And I'm the Queen of England." Margaret went back to her chopping. "I'm just saying, life's short. If you've found someone who makes you happy, don't waste time pretending otherwise." Cole heard about this conversation later that evening when Rosie sought him out, her face still flushed with embarrassment. "Margaret thinks we should get married," she said without preamble. They were standing in a quiet corner of the hotel lobby. Cole had been reviewing the schedule for the next week. Now he looked up, his mind going blank. She said what? That everyone can see we care about each other, that we're being obvious and ridiculous by not acknowledging it. Rosie was twisting her hands together. "She's wrong, right? We're just friends, good friends, that's all." Cole should have agreed, should have laughed it off, made a joke, moved past the awkwardness. Instead, he heard himself say, "Is that what you want? For us to just be friends?" Rosie's hand stilled. I... What do you want? It was a fair question. Cole thought about the past few months, about how his life had changed since that day in the wilderness when he'd followed the smell of her cooking and found more than just a meal. He thought about how empty his days had felt before Boseman and how full they felt now. I want whatever makes you happy, he said carefully. If that's friendship, then that's what we'll be. But if you want more, right... He trailed off, suddenly unsure. Cole Rayner, are you trying to court me? Rosie's voice was trembling slightly, though whether from fear or something else, Cole couldn't tell. I don't know, maybe. Would you want me to? I'm not exactly a catch. I'm fat, I'm stubborn, I work impossible hours, and I have no family to speak of. Most men wouldn't look twice at me. Most men are idiots. That's not an answer. Cole took a breath. This felt more terrifying than facing down armed criminals. You're the strongest person I know. You're brilliant at what you do. You make me laugh. You make me think. You saved my life, literally, and maybe in other ways too. And yes, I would very much like to court you, if you'll have me. Rosie stared at him for a long moment. Then she started to cry, which terrified Cole until he realized she was also smiling. You're an idiot, she said. I just said most men are idiots. I never claimed to be an exception. A complete idiot. But she was moving closer now. Yes. The answer is yes. You can court me. You can buy me dinner at some restaurant that isn't my own kitchen. You can take me on walks and hold my hand and do all those ridiculous things that courting couples do. I can do that. Good. Rosie wiped her eyes. But you should know, I'm not good at this. At romance and feelings and all of that. I'm much better at cooking. Lucky for you, I'm not good at it either. We'll figure it out together. They stood there in the lobby, neither quite sure what to do next. Finally, Rosie laughed. This is absurd. We're absurd. Completely. I need to get back to the kitchen. Dinner service starts in an hour. And I need to finish the schedule. But neither of them moved. Cole reached out, took Rosie's hand, and she let him. Her hand was warm and work-roughened, and holding it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Tomorrow, Cole said. Tomorrow I'll take you somewhere nice for dinner. Not the Grand Union. Definitely not the Grand Union. Somewhere you can just be Rosie, not the cook everyone wants something from. I'd like that. She squeezed his hand once, then headed back toward the kitchen. Cole watched her go, a smile on his face that felt permanent. The courting was awkward and wonderful in equal measure. Cole took Rosie to a small restaurant on the edge of town where the food was decent and nobody knew her. They talked for hours about everything except the obvious thing hanging between them. He bought her flowers from the market, wildflowers because the cultivated ones seemed too formal, and she put them in a jar in her room where she could see them every morning. They went for walks on Rosie's rare days off, bundled against the cold, talking about their childhoods and their dreams. Cole told her about Ohio, about his family, about things he'd never told anyone. Rosie talked about growing up caught between two worlds, about her mother's strength and her father's quiet dignity. They loved each other, Rosie said one afternoon as they walked through the snow. Everyone told them not to marry, that it would be hard, that their children would suffer for it. And it was hard. People were cruel. But they loved each other, and that made the rest bearable. Do you wish things had been different? Cole asked. Sometimes. But being different made me strong, made me stubborn, made me someone who doesn't quit even when things are hard. She looked at him. I think my parents would have liked you. Yeah? Yeah. My father would have respected your integrity. My mother would have appreciated your practicality. And they both would have been glad that I found someone who sees me for who I am, not just what I look like. Winter deepened. The hotel stayed busy despite the cold, or perhaps because of it. People wanted warm beds and hot meals, and Rosie's cooking drew them in droves. Cole's reputation as someone who could handle trouble without creating more of it made the Grand Union one of the safest establishments in town. Christmas came, and Rosie prepared a feast that had guests talking for weeks. She made roast goose and glazed ham, potatoes prepared 3 different ways, vegetables that somehow tasted better than they had any right to, and desserts that were works of art. Cole helped where he could, mostly just staying out of her way, and making sure she ate something herself. Late on Christmas night, after the last guest had left the dining room and the kitchen was finally clean, Rosie sat down at one of the work tables and put her head in her hands. I'm exhausted, she said. Completely, utterly exhausted. You were amazing today, Cole said, sitting beside her. I was adequate. The goose was slightly overcooked, the potatoes could have been fluffier, and I completely forgot to make the cranberry sauce I'd planned. No one noticed any of that except you. I noticed. That's what matters. But she was smiling as she said it. Still, it went well overall. Carlyle seemed pleased. He was thrilled. He told me earlier that you've single-handedly made the Grand Union the most sought-after dining establishment in 3 territories. He's exaggerating. He's not. Cole reached over, took her hand. You did it, Rosie. Everything you said you wanted when we first met. You made it happen. Rosie looked at their joined hands. We made it happen. I wouldn't be here if you hadn't believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. That's not... It is. She met his eyes. I was ready to give up, Cole. That day at the hotel when Carlyle's clerk looked at me like I was a joke. I was this close to walking out and never coming back. But you were there, and you made me believe I could do it. So don't try to tell me this was all me. We're a team. A team, Cole repeated, liking the sound of it. A team. Rosie stood, stretched. Come on. I have something for you. She led him upstairs to her room. It was the first time Cole had been inside, and he was struck by how much it reflected her. Organized, practical, but with small touches of beauty. The wildflowers he'd given her were still there, dried now but carefully preserved. A quilt her mother had made covered the bed. Her few books were arranged on a small shelf. Rosie retrieved a package wrapped in brown paper and handed it to him. Merry Christmas. Cole opened it carefully. Inside was a new leather holster for his revolver, the craftsmanship exquisite. I noticed your old one was wearing through, Rosie said. I asked the leather worker on 3rd Street to make you a new one. It's practical more than anything, but I thought... Cole kissed her. It wasn't planned, wasn't something he'd consciously decided to do. One moment he was looking at the holster. The next his hands were cupping her face and his lips were on hers. She made a small sound of surprise, then kissed him back. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. That was... Rosie started. I'm sorry, Cole said. I should have asked first. I didn't mean to... Don't you dare apologize. Rosie's eyes were bright. I've been waiting for you to do that for weeks. Weeks? Weeks. You're a very slow quarter, Cole Rayner. In my defense, I've never done this before. Neither have I. Rosie laughed. We're both terrible at this. Completely terrible. Cole kissed her again, slower this time, taking his time. Rosie's arms came up around his neck, and they stood there in her small room, the rest of the world forgotten. When they finally separated, Rosie was smiling in a way Cole had never seen before. Open, vulnerable, happy. I should go, Cole said reluctantly. It's late, and you need sleep. I know, but I don't want you to go. I don't want to go either. But Mrs. Kowalski will worry if I'm not back soon, and we should probably do this properly. Properly, Rosie repeated. Right, because we're such proper people. We can try. Cole moved toward the door, then stopped. Rosie, I didn't get you anything for Christmas. Yes, you did. You stayed. You built a life here instead of running back to Helena. That's the best gift I could have asked for. Cole left before he could change his mind about staying. He walked back to his boarding house through snow-covered streets, his new holster in his hand, feeling like his life had just shifted in a fundamental way. The next months passed in a haze of contentment Cole had never experienced before. He and Rosie were officially courting now, and while they kept it relatively quiet, Boseman was still a small enough town that gossip could be vicious. Everyone who mattered knew and seemed genuinely happy for them. Margaret took credit for pushing them together. Carlyle approved, saying that having his head of security and his head cook in a stable relationship could only benefit the hotel. Even Mrs. Kowalski, who had seemed incapable of smiling, gave Cole a knowing look one morning and told him he seemed lighter. Spring came early that year, melting the snow and bringing new life to Boseman. The town was growing rapidly, new businesses opening, new families moving in. The rough mining camp slowly transforming into something more permanent. One evening in late March, Cole was making his rounds when he noticed a commotion near the hotel's front entrance. He went to investigate and found a crowd gathered around something on the ground. It was a man, badly beaten, barely conscious. Cole pushed through the crowd and knelt beside him. "Someone get the doctor," he called out. "Now!" The man's eyes fluttered open, tried to focus on Cole's face. His lips moved, forming words Cole couldn't hear. Cole leaned closer. "Don't try to talk. Help is coming." But the man gripped Cole's arm with surprising strength. "Garrett," he whispered. "Brothers, they're here." Cole's blood ran cold. "What did you say?" "Garrett brothers. In town. Looking for someone. Federal marshal." Then the man's eyes rolled back and he lost consciousness. The doctor arrived within minutes, a tired-looking man named Hutchins, who'd seen more than his share of violence in Boseman. He examined the beaten man quickly, shaking his head. "He needs to be moved somewhere I can work on him properly. He's lost a lot of blood." "Take him to the hotel," Cole said. "We've got empty rooms. I'll cover the cost." They carried the man inside up to a small room on the second floor. The doctor worked while Cole paced outside, his mind racing. The Garrett brothers. Here. After all these months, they'd come to Boseman, looking for a federal marshal, looking for him. Rosie found him an hour later, still pacing. "Cole? What happened?" "Someone said there was a man beaten outside the hotel." Cole told her everything, about the Garrett brothers, about the family they'd murdered, about how he'd chased them for months before losing their trail, about how the beaten man had warned him they were here. Rosie's face went pale. "They came here for you." "Maybe. Or maybe it's a coincidence. Boseman's growing. Lots of people passing through." "You don't believe that?" "No." Cole ran a hand through his hair. "I need to talk to Sheriff Meeks. Warn him. And I need to figure out if they know I'm here or if they're just passing through." "And if they do know?" Cole didn't have a good answer. "Then we deal with it." The doctor emerged from the room, wiping blood from his hands. "He'll live, but he's in bad shape. Broken ribs, internal bleeding, I can't do much about except wait and see. He won't be talking coherently for at least a day, maybe longer." "Did he say anything else about who did this?" "Just that it was two men, brothers. They were asking about federal lawmen in town." Hutchins looked at Cole meaningfully. "That means something to you?" "It might. Keep him comfortable, Doc, and don't let anyone in that room except people you trust." Cole went to find Sheriff Meeks. The sheriff's office was a small building near the center of town, and Meeks was there despite the late hour, working through a stack of reports. "Rayner," Meeks said, looking up. He was a solid man in his 50s, competent, if not brilliant. "What brings you by?" Cole explained the situation. Meeks listened, his expression growing more serious with each word. "The Garrett brothers," Meeks said when Cole finished. "I know that name. Wanted for murder in 3 territories. Last I heard they were up near the Canadian border." "They were. I tracked them there last fall, lost their trail. Thought they'd crossed over into Canada for good. Apparently not." Meeks stood, moved to a map on the wall. "If they're here, they're either hiding or looking for something. You said they were asking about federal lawmen. That's what the beaten man said before he lost consciousness. How many people in Boseman know you used to be a marshal?" Cole thought about it. "Carlisle. You. Maybe a dozen others. I don't advertise it. But word spreads. Small town, new face. Someone's bound to ask questions." Meeks traced a finger along the map. "If the Garretts tracked you here, they're either very determined or very stupid. Maybe both." "What do you want me to do?" "Nothing rash. Keep your eyes open. Stay armed. Don't go anywhere alone if you can help it. I'll put out word to my deputies. Have them watch for 2 men matching the Garretts' description." Meeks paused. "You carrying?" Cole patted his new holster. "Always." "Good. These men, they're killers. Don't hesitate if it comes to a confrontation." Cole left the sheriff's office with more questions than answers. He should have felt the old familiar rush of the hunt, the focus that came with tracking dangerous men. Instead, he felt something closer to dread. He'd built a life here, a good life. The Garretts showing up threatened all of that. He went back to the hotel and found Rosie in the kitchen, ostensibly preparing for the next day's breakfast service, but really just moving things around nervously. What did the sheriff say? She asked. Cole told her. Rosie's hand stilled on the bread dough she'd been kneading. So we just wait. Wait for them to find you or wait for the sheriff to find them first. That's about it. I hate waiting. Rosie punched the dough harder than necessary. I hate feeling helpless. You're not helpless. You're just not a gunfighter, which is a good thing. But you are. You could go after them, track them down before they come here, and leave you and everyone else at the hotel vulnerable? No. Cole moved closer. I'm not that man anymore, Rosie, the one who puts the chase above everything else. I learned that lesson. I'm not leaving. Rosie looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. Okay. Then we wait. Together. They didn't have to wait long. 2 days later, Cole was doing his evening patrol when he noticed 2 men at the hotel bar. They were rough-looking, trail-dusty, and something about them set off every alarm Cole had developed over years of law enforcement. He moved closer, trying to get a better look without being obvious. One of the men turned, and Cole's breath caught. It was Ben Garrett. Older, more weathered, but definitely him. And the man sitting next to him had to be his brother Thomas. They were here, in the hotel, 20 feet from where Cole stood. Cole's hand moved toward his gun, then stopped. The bar was crowded with guests and locals. A gunfight here would be a massacre. He needed to think, needed to plan. He backed away slowly, then went to find Carlisle. The hotel owner was in his office reviewing accounts. The Garrett brothers are in the bar, Cole said without preamble. Carlisle looked up sharply. You're certain? Positive. I need you to clear the bar. Make up an excuse, private party, closing early for cleaning. I don't care. But get the civilians out. And then? Then I deal with it. Carlisle studied him. You're going to try to arrest them. I'm going to try to make them leave peacefully. But yes, if it comes to it, I'm arresting them. You're not a marshal anymore. I'm hotel security, and they're dangerous criminals on your property. That's enough legal justification for me. Carlisle nodded slowly. Give me 10 minutes to clear the bar. Then it's yours. But Cole used those 10 minutes to find Rosie and tell her what was happening. Absolutely not, Rosie said immediately. You're not going after them alone. I won't be alone. The sheriff's sending deputies, but I need to keep them contained until backup arrives. Cole, these men are murderers. They killed a family. They'll kill you too if you give them the chance. I know, but I can't just let them walk around Boseman freely. Someone else will get hurt. Cole took her hands. I need you to stay in the kitchen. Lock the door. Don't come out until I come get you or the sheriff does. This is a terrible plan. It's the only plan I've got. Rosie pulled him down and kissed him hard. Don't you dare die on me, Cole Rayner. We have plans. Important plans that require you being alive. I'll do my best. Cole left before she could argue further. He checked his gun, fully loaded, clean, ready. His hands were steady, his mind clear. This was familiar territory, even if the setting was different. The bar was nearly empty when Cole entered. Carlisle had done his job well. Only the Garrett brothers remained, sitting at a corner table with whiskey glasses in front of them. Cole walked over, his hand resting casually on his gun. Gentlemen, he said, I'm going to need you to come with me. Ben Garrett looked up, and recognition dawned in his eyes. Well, hell, if it ain't the marshal who chased us halfway to Canada. Former marshal, current head of security for this hotel, and you're both under arrest for murder. Thomas Garrett laughed. On whose authority? You said it yourself. You're former. That means you got no jurisdiction over us. I've got all the authority I need to remove dangerous criminals from this establishment. You can come peacefully, or we can do this the hard way. Ben stood slowly. He was bigger than Cole remembered, with the kind of muscles that came from hard labor. See, here's the thing. We didn't come to Boseman looking for trouble. We came looking for you specifically. That's so. That is so. Word got around that the marshal who chased us had settled down here, started a new life, even got himself a woman, some fat Chinese cook who works in this very hotel. Ben smiled, and it was ugly. We thought maybe we'd remind you what happens to people who chase the Garrett brothers. Thought maybe we'd make sure you understood the cost of sticking your nose where it don't belong. Cold fury washed through Cole. You go near her. You're dead men. Tough talk for someone outnumbered. You think you're outnumbered? Cole's voice had gone flat and dangerous. There are deputies surrounding this hotel right now. You draw on me. You won't make it out of this building alive. It was a bluff. Cole had no idea if Meeks had managed to get deputies in position that quickly. But the Garretts didn't know that. Thomas looked uncertain. Ben, maybe we should... Shut up. Ben's eyes never left Cole. You're bluffing. There's no deputies. Try me. For a long moment, nobody moved. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. Then Ben's hand drifted toward his gun. Cole drew faster than he'd moved in months, his revolver clearing the holster and leveling at Ben's chest in one smooth motion. Don't, Cole said quietly. Ben froze, his hand halfway to his gun. You won't shoot. Too many witnesses, too many complications. You murdered a family, mother, father, 2 children under 10. You shot them and left them in the road like they were nothing. And then you came here, to my town, and threatened the woman I love. Cole's gun hand was rock steady. You think I won't shoot? Try me. Something in his voice must have convinced Ben, because the larger man's hand moved away from his gun. Smart choice, Cole said. Now, both of you, very slowly, unbuckle your gun belts and let them drop. The brothers exchanged glances. Cole could see them calculating, weighing their options. Then Sheriff Meeks walked into the bar, a shotgun cradled in his arms and 2 deputies behind him. Gentlemen, Meeks said pleasantly, I do believe Mr. Rayner asked you to disarm. I'd suggest you comply before someone gets hurt. The fight went out of the Garretts. They unbuckled their gun belts and let them fall. Meeks' deputies moved in quickly, securing the brothers with handcuffs. Ben and Thomas Garrett, Meeks said formally, you're under arrest for murder, robbery, and about a dozen other charges. You'll be held in our jail until federal marshals can be summoned to transport you for trial. Ben glared at Cole as the deputies let him out. This ain't over. Yeah, it is, Cole said. It's been over since the moment you decided to come after me instead of disappearing into Canada like you should have. The bar emptied. Cole stood there, his gun still in his hand, adrenaline finally starting to fade and leave him shaky. That was well handled, Meeks said. I got lucky. If you hadn't shown up when you did, but I did. That's what matters. Meeks clapped him on the shoulder. You did good work today, Reiner. Those men would have hurt someone if you hadn't stopped them. Cole holstered his gun and went to find Rosie. She was in the kitchen where he'd left her, sitting at a work table with her hands clenched together. It's over, Cole said. They're arrested. It's done. Rosie stood and crossed the kitchen in 3 quick strides, throwing her arms around him. I heard the voices. I thought, when I heard you talking to them about me, about what they planned, I wouldn't let them touch you. Never. I know. But hearing them say those things, knowing they came here to hurt you because you did your job, she pulled back, her eyes fierce. Promise me you're done with that life, that you're not going back to being a marshal. I'm done, Cole said, and meant it. This was the last time. The Garretts will be tried and hanged, and that chapter of my life closes with them. I'm exactly where I want to be. Here, in Boseman, here, with you, building something instead of tearing things down. That's what I want. Rosie kissed him, and for a moment the kitchen and the hotel and everything else disappeared. When they finally broke apart, she was smiling. Good, because I have plans for us, and none of them involve you chasing criminals across the frontier. What kind of plans? The kind that involve a permanent partnership, the kind that might include marriage. If you were interested in that sort of thing. Cole's heart did something complicated in his chest. Are you proposing to me? Someone has to. You're too slow to do it yourself. But Rosie's eyes were uncertain. Would that be something you'd want? Yes? Cole didn't hesitate. Yes? Absolutely yes. Even though I'm difficult and stubborn and I work too much? Especially because of those things. Cole took her hands. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me, Rosie May Chen. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, if you'll have me. Then I guess we're engaged. Rosie laughed, a sound of pure joy. This is completely backwards. I'm supposed to wait for you to ask. Nothing about us has been conventional. Why start now? They stood in the kitchen, holding each other, and Cole felt something he'd never expected to feel again. Hope. Real, solid hope for a future that didn't involve violence and failure and endless chasing. The next weeks passed in a flurry of activity. The Garrett brothers were tried quickly. Their crimes were well documented, and numerous witnesses testified against them. They were sentenced to hang, the execution scheduled for early summer. Cole attended the trial, testifying about his pursuit of them and their recent threats. It was the first time he'd been in a courtroom in months, and it felt strange, like putting on an old coat that no longer fit quite right. When the verdict was read, Ben Garrett stared at Cole with pure hatred. "You did this. You and your obsession with justice." "No," Cole said quietly. "You did this when you killed that family. I just made sure you faced the consequences." The brothers were hanged on a Tuesday morning. Cole didn't attend. He'd done his part by testifying. He felt no need to watch them die. Instead, he spent that morning with Rosie, planning their wedding. They decided on a small ceremony at the hotel, just close friends and the people who mattered. Margaret had cried when Rosie asked her to stand up with her. Carlisle had offered to host the reception free of charge, saying it was the least he could do for two people who'd helped make the Grand Union the success it had become. Sheriff Meeks had agreed to stand up with Cole, and he'd also offered some unexpected news. "I'm getting too old for this job," Meeks said one evening over drinks. "Been thinking about retiring, moving somewhere warmer. Town council's been asking me about successors." Cole had a feeling he knew where this was going. And I recommended you. You've got the experience, the temperament, and people trust you. The position would be yours if you wanted it." Cole thought about it. Sheriff of Boseman would mean more responsibility, longer hours, less time with Rosie, but it would also mean continuing the work he'd started, protecting the town he'd come to love. "Can I think about it?" Cole asked. "Take your time. The job won't open up for another 6 months at least." Cole discussed it with Rosie that night. She listened carefully, then said, "What do you want? Really want, not what you think you should want." "I want to be useful, to do work that matters, but I also want a life that doesn't consume me the way marshalling did. Those things aren't mutually exclusive." Rosie poured them both coffee. "You could be sheriff and still have a life. Set boundaries, hire good deputies, trust them to handle things when you need time off. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. You wouldn't mind. The danger, the irregular hours. I'd worry. But I worry now. At least as sheriff, you'd be protecting our town instead of chasing outlaws across 3 territories." She smiled. "And honestly, Cole, you're good at it. At keeping people safe, at solving problems without unnecessary violence. Boseman needs that kind of leadership." Cole took the job. When Meeks officially retired that fall, Cole was sworn in as the new sheriff of Boseman. The ceremony was small but meaningful, attended by most of the town. Rosie stood beside him, holding his hand, and Cole realized that this was what success looked like. Not catching every criminal or solving every case, but building something lasting in a community that mattered. Their wedding happened on a crisp September morning, 6 months after the Garrett's hanging. The hotel's dining room was decorated with wildflowers. Rosie had insisted on them, saying they reminded her of the first flowers Cole had given her. The ceremony was officiated by Reverend Coleman, the same man who'd been one of Rosie's trial diners. Cole stood at the front of the room in a new suit, watching Rosie walk toward him, and felt his throat tighten. She wore a simple dress the color of cream, her hair pinned up with small flowers woven through it. She looked beautiful and terrified and absolutely certain all at once. When she reached him, she whispered, "I'm shaking." "Me too," Cole whispered back. The ceremony was short. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promises to support each other, to build a life together, to face whatever challenges came with honesty and love. When Reverend Coleman pronounced them married, Cole kissed his wife and heard applause and cheering from their assembled friends. The reception lasted into the evening. Rosie had prepared a feast, of course she had, and people ate and drank and danced to music provided by a traveling musician who happened to be staying at the hotel. Margaret gave a speech that made everyone laugh and cry. Carlisle toasted the couple and announced that he was giving them a week off, paid, for a honeymoon. Late in the evening, Cole and Rosie stepped outside for a moment of quiet. The street was peaceful, lit by gas lamps and the stars overhead. "We did it," Rosie said, leaning against him. "We actually did it. Built a life out of nothing," Cole agreed. "Started with you feeding a starving man in the wilderness. Ended here. Not ended, started. This is just the beginning. Cole looked at his wife, and felt a contentment he'd never imagined possible. You're right. What do you think comes next? Everything. Children, maybe, if we're lucky. Growing the restaurant. I've been thinking about expanding, maybe opening a second location. Watching this town grow and being part of making it better. Rosie turned to face him. What about you? Any regrets? About leaving your martial career, about settling down? Cole thought about the man he'd been 6 months ago, half dead in the wilderness, chasing men he'd never catch, convinced that nothing he did mattered. Then he thought about the man he was now, sheriff of a growing town, married to a woman who challenged and supported him in equal measure, building something that would last. No regrets, he said. Not a single one. Good, because I have plans for us, Sheriff Rayner. Big plans. I'd expect nothing less from you. They stood together in the evening air, and Cole thought about choices and consequences and the strange paths life took. He'd come to Boseman by accident, following the smell of cooking when he was too stubborn to admit he was dying. He'd stayed because of a job offer and a woman who made him want to be better than he was. And now, somehow, he'd built a life worth living. Not perfect. Perfection was a fantasy. But real and solid and full of possibility. The years that followed weren't easy. Boseman continued to grow, bringing new challenges and new opportunities. There were crimes to solve, disputes to settle, conflicts that tested Cole's patience and his principles. There were long nights when he came home exhausted and questioning whether he was making any difference at all. But Rosie was always there, grounding him, reminding him why the work mattered. And he was there for her too, through the brutal hours and the difficult customers and the moments when her own doubts crept in. They built something together, not just a marriage, but a partnership that made them both stronger. Rosie's restaurant expanded, became legendary throughout the territory. People traveled for days just to taste her cooking, and she trained a new generation of cooks who carried her techniques and her philosophy to kitchens across the West. Cole's tenure as sheriff brought real change to Boseman. Crime dropped. Disputes were settled fairly. The town gained a reputation as a place where people could build lives without fear, where hard work was rewarded and justice meant something. They had children, 2 daughters who inherited their mother's determination and their father's sense of fairness. Cole taught them to ride and shoot. Rosie taught them to cook and to never apologize for taking up space in the world. And through it all, they remembered where they'd started. Cole never forgot the desperation of that moment in the wilderness when he'd followed the smell of cooking and found salvation. Rosie never forgot the terror of her trial cook and the man who'd stood beside her and refused to let her give up. On their 25th anniversary, they sat together on the porch of the house they'd built on the edge of town. Their daughters were grown now, building their own lives. The restaurant was thriving under a manager Rosie had trained personally. Cole had retired from sheriffing the year before, passing the badge to a younger man he trusted. "Do you ever think about how unlikely this all was?" Rosie asked, holding Cole's hand. "That we found each other, that we made it work, that we built all of this?" "Every day," Cole said. "Every single day. I was so scared that day at the Grand Union, so certain I was going to fail. I was scared too. Scared of what came next, scared of admitting that I wanted something more than the chase." Rosie smiled. "We were both disasters. Complete disasters. And yet here we are. Here we are." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the mountains. Boseman stretched out below them, a real town now, with schools and churches and businesses that would outlast any of them. They'd been part of building that, had contributed their own small pieces to something larger than themselves. And they'd done it together. 2 people who'd been lost and alone until they'd stumbled into each other's paths and decided to stop running from their fears. It wasn't the story Cole had imagined for himself when he'd become a marshal all those years ago. It wasn't the triumphant narrative of catching every criminal and making the world perfectly safe. But it was better. It was real. It was a life built on love and work and the daily choice to keep trying, keep building, keep believing that what they did mattered. "I love you," Cole said quietly. "I love you too," Rosie replied, "even though you're still terrible at romance. After 25 years, I'd think you'd give up on that." "Never. A woman can hope." Cole laughed and pulled his wife closer. The stars were coming out now, bright against the darkening sky. Somewhere in town, their daughters were living their own lives, making their own choices, building their own futures. And here, on this porch, two people who'd saved each other in a Montana wilderness sat together and watched the world turn, grateful for every unlikely moment that had brought them to this place. Because that was the thing about life. It wasn't about the perfect plan or the flawless execution. It was about showing up, doing the work, and finding the people who made the struggle worthwhile. It was about building something that mattered, even if that something was just a life shared between two people who refused to give up on each other. Cole and Rosie had built that life from nothing, from hunger and desperation and fear, and turned it into something worth having, something worth fighting for, something that would outlast them both. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.